It all started when someone called Seo Ho's name, and he immediately responded decisively, full of a sense of responsibility. But right after, he was extremely surprised when the other person unexpectedly suggested he take over the leadership of the merchant group, replacing the current head. Seo Ho immediately refused, explaining that the position should rightfully belong to his eldest brother, especially since he was just the youngest son in the family. However, the older brother firmly disagreed, insisting that Seo Ho was the one with superior abilities in this field. He even asserted that the remarkable growth of the merchant group from a small, fragmented entity into one of the 3 largest trading guilds today was entirely due to Seo Ho's contributions. Even so, Seo Ho fell silent, a heavy pressure beginning to weigh on his heart from the responsibility this position demanded. Then suddenly, he revealed his true feelings, saying he disliked shouldering responsibility, that he always dreamed of a free, easy life, unbound by duty or fame. He emphasized his refusal, saying that becoming a leader meant attending social banquets, flattering deceitful partners, and bearing all consequences if the guild's reputation was damaged. The atmosphere immediately plunged into a heavy silence, tension evident on the faces of everyone present. And then that silence continued to envelop the meeting scene. After a moment of thought and a sigh, the older brother finally nodded in agreement, telling Seo Ho to do what he thought was right. He once again reminded him in a gentle tone, "Just do what you want." But then suddenly everything around them changed completely. Everything caught fire. The ferocious flames spread, engulfing everything he and his family had built together over so many years. Amidst the raging sea of fire, Seo Ho saw his loyal bodyguard, who had protected him his whole life, now lying motionless on the ground, his body lifeless. He also saw his second older brother fallen right beside him. Then, one by one, they appeared in the crimson glow of the fire. All the leaders of the merchant group were dead. From Mr. Giang, head of the finance department, to Mr. Lim, head of the wind department, along with generals and heads of other departments. Seo Ho sat silently amidst the carnage, his eyes vacant as he looked around and saw all his acquaintances dead. Blood flowed incessantly from a wound on his face, blurring his vision. But at that moment, he immediately recognized the attacker. It was none other than the leader of the Bak Thien Trading Guild, Nam Kung Chang. He stood before Seo Ho, coldly pressing his sword to Seo Ho's neck, sighing with regret that he hadn't wanted to kill him. His eyes glinted with derision, a contemptuous mocking smile on his face. Seo Ho, though severely injured, still mockingly asked him in a provocative tone if the Bak Thien Trading Guild wasn't under the supervision of the orthodox Min Jiao. So how could they do something like this? Nam Kung Kang calmly replied that his superiors had heard that Seo Ho himself was obstructing their interests. He added that everything that happened today was because Seo Ho had interfered in their business for money. Despite his physical pain, Seo Ho smirked sarcastically, saying that losers in competition blaming others just for money showed their weakness and foolish excuses. Those words enraged Nam Kung Chang. He shouted loudly, mockingly asking if Seo Ho's ears had gone deaf. But unexpectedly, Seo Ho surged up in his final moments, concentrating all his internal energy, which glowed in his palm, shouting loudly as he launched a final attack. However, his opponent was one step faster, delivering a powerful blow that sent Seo Ho flying backward, crashing to the ground. Seo Ho lay gasping, coughing up blood from his severe injuries, filled with regret for underestimating his enemy. Nam Kung Chang slowly approached, declaring that the reason they acted was because of all the threats Seo Ho and the Not High Trading Guild posed. He said his farewells, then slowly raised his sword to finish him. In the end, Seo Ho had no strength left to resist and received the fatal blow. In that moment between life and death, his heart was filled with sorrow, wondering if everything he and his family had done still had any meaning, and if the lives of merchants like them truly had value in the vast world of Murim. He blamed himself, thinking that if only he had started learning martial arts sooner, things might have been different. If only the Not High Trading Guild could have grown even stronger. If only circumstances had been different, all this tragedy would not have happened. Suddenly he heard someone call him young master, and in that instant Seo-ho's eyes widened in surprise. "Young master, you can't sleep here." He was shocked to find himself in a strange situation where a man was scolding him for daring to doze off on his first day of work, despite being ill. "Young master, even if you're sick, you can't sleep during work hours." Seo-ho came to his senses in extreme confusion, his mind hazy, wondering what was happening. He didn't know if he was alive or dead. "Where is this? Am I still alive?" The man in front of him began to scold fiercely, demanding he quickly prepare the data analysis from last year's harvest. "Stop daydreaming and prepare the analysis for last year's harvest." Seo-ho felt his head spin, his vision blurred and his ears rang, unable to hear clearly anymore. Then he heard another voice saying that the leader of the merchant group was very worried about him and suggested he should rest in bed. "Young master is unwell, please rest. The guild leader is very worried about you." Still in a panic, Seo-ho suddenly looked at the man before him and mistook him for his old enemy Nam Kung Kang, then unexpectedly lunged to attack with all his fury, shouting his name, "Nam Kung Kang, die!" The man was utterly stunned, barely managing to dodge the sudden attack. Then he slapped Seo-ho on the head, scolding and mocking him for daring to sleep during work and daydreaming in broad daylight. "Sleeping during work hours, huh? Are you still dreaming?" Seo-ho felt that slap was strangely familiar. And as his mind gradually cleared, he realized the man in front of him was not Nam Kung Chang, but Yusaka, the very head of the Not-High Trading Guild's Internal Affairs Department. Seo-ho was stunned, because Yusaka had died long ago. A wave of extreme panic washed over him. Impossible, he died many years ago. Seo-ho shouted in astonishment, asking if this was hell. But Yusaka just replied in a sarcastic and mocking tone that perhaps Seo-ho wasn't fully awake yet. "You think you're in hell? It seems you're not quite awake yet." Yusaka continued to scold, saying that in all his years teaching the three young masters, no one had dared to attack him, and that Seo-ho was truly special for daring to do so. "You're the first one to dare hit me. You're truly special." Seo-ho, embarrassed, quickly apologized, saying it was just a mistake because he wasn't fully awake. Yusaka coldly ordered him back to his room to face the wall as punishment. Seo-ho sat on a drab chair in his room. He tried to make sense of the situation, full of doubt as to why Yusaka was alive and scolding him like in the old days. Gradually, he realized he had returned to the past, and he remembered that his first task when he began studying commerce was to analyze the supply from the previous year's harvest. He clearly remembered that day. Yusaka had given him a harsh scolding and even ridiculed his harvest report. Suddenly, a glimmer of hope sparked in Seo-ho's mind. Perhaps this return was a chance for him to change the future. Regaining his composure, he called out to his trusted bodyguard, "Yang Am. Yang Am, come here." Yang Am immediately appeared, bowing respectfully, ready to receive orders. "Young master, I am always ready to receive your orders." Seo-ho began with a strange question, asking his bodyguard about his current age. "How old am I this year?" Yang Am was surprised by the question, chuckled, and asked back if the blow earlier had made him lose his mind. "Did that hit make you lose your mind?" Then he replied that Seo-ho's 15th birthday had just passed yesterday. "Yesterday was your 15th birthday." The answer shocked Seo-ho. He couldn't believe it, repeating the age with a blank expression. 15 years old. While his memory was clear that in the present, he was 39 years old. Seeing Seo-ho's panicked expression, Yang Am began to wonder if a psychiatrist should be called to check the young master's mental state. "Perhaps you need a psychiatrist?" Seo-ho looked down at his hands. They were soft, without a single scar, further convincing him that he had truly returned to his youth. He slapped himself hard to check if he was dreaming. The sharp pain made him understand this was reality. Yang Am watched the strange action and asked what he was doing. Seo-ho replied, "It hurts, I'm in pain. You think slapping yourself wouldn't hurt?" Seo-ho was still confused, muttering that he was supposed to be dead. "I was already dead." Then he remembered, painful memories flooding back. The sight of his family lying motionless on the floor, their bodies drenched in blood, and the moment the Bakhtin Trading Guild leader's sword pierced his neck, the pain returned as he touched his neck, confirming that it had truly happened. Xiao, stunned and dazed, finally accepted the truth that he had returned to the past. But even being alive again, the memories of the massacre were still as vivid as yesterday. He clutched his neck. The memory made the pain feel real again. And at that moment, he made a firm resolve that he would never let that tragedy repeat itself. Because now he clearly remembered everything that had happened. He knew what he needed to do, what to avoid, and this time he would use all his experience from his previous life to become stronger, ready to confront the Murem alliance. Suddenly, an important detail flashed in his memory. He called Yang Am again to confirm the date. "Yang Am, are you sure yesterday was my birthday?" he asked again with a serious gaze. Xiao quickly recalculated the time in his head. And then he realized there was only 1 week left before the tragedy of the past would occur. Zhuho immediately shouted for Yang Am, saying they had to act immediately. He emphasized that everything needed to be done discreetly, without anyone knowing, without anyone discovering. "We must act now." Yang Am was bewildered by the young master's strange words and actions. He teased that perhaps the young master was going through puberty, but Xiao dismissed it immediately. "Are you having a late puberty? No, I know what I'm doing." Meanwhile, elsewhere, a stranger dressed in black was silently preparing weapons in the darkness. Those around him asked if he was sure about the upcoming plan. He replied enigmatically but confidently that he knew exactly what he was doing. "Of course, I know very well what I'm doing." Two men began a conversation about Xiao, the youngest son of the Not High Trading Guild. One of them mentioned that Xiao had just started learning commerce, and his bodyguard was always a martial arts expert. The other asked if the plan could be completed without detection. He confidently replied that he wasn't afraid of a sickly child who always needed a cane to walk, and he already had a plan to deal with the bodyguard Yang Am. If anything went wrong, he asserted he would kill all witnesses without hesitation. The other mockingly reminded him that he used to serve that family. But the man in black replied coldly that the destiny of the child named Xiao was an early death. He even smirked sinisterly, saying that if he could help him end his suffering early, it would be a favor. He confidently asserted that at this very moment, Xiao was probably waiting for death to find him. Just then, Yang Am called out Xiao's name loudly, his voice full of worry. "Young master, are you all right?" And Xiao was sitting on the shoulders of his close servant, holding binoculars, observing all directions. Xiao joked with his bodyguard. "I'm a weak person, so I need to move around a bit. Exploring outside is good." Yang Am tilted his head in confusion, asking, "So what exactly are we looking for?" Xiao frowned slightly, suddenly thinking of a strange fruit, and muttered to himself, "I'm looking for the most miraculous medicinal herb in this entire region." Suddenly a dried bloodstain appeared on the white snow. That bloodstain brought back painful memories from his previous life, when Xiao's bodyguard was severely injured and begged him to quickly leave the place. Xiao at that time had cried out in pain, "I can't leave you behind." But Yang Am sternly said, "This is your mission. Please run, I will hold them off. I only hope that my death is not in vain. That way I will be content." He bitterly reminded Xiao, "Ever since you were young, you never listened to me." Then angrily shouted, "Are you going to make my death meaningless?" Just then the enemies approached, shouting, "Get him!" While Yang Am drew his sword, preparing to fight, he turned back and shouted, "Xiao, run! You must live. I believe that if you live, you will go further than anyone else." In that moment, Xiao remembered that in his previous life, there were only two people he could absolutely trust. The first was his loyal bodyguard, Yang Am, and the second was his devoted servant, Biyuan, currently shivering from the cold while carrying him on his shoulders. Xiao silently resolved to himself that what he was looking for was the miraculous medicine that would cause bloodshed in the future, and only these two people could complete the mission of finding that dangerous medicine with him. Biyuan asked, "Young master, what are we looking for in this white snow?" Xiao raised his hand, pointing to a distant spot, replying, "It's over there." He pointed to a miraculous fruit called the pure ice peach, a fruit carrying extremely potent yin energy. equivalent to a 10,000-year-old ginseng. Yang Am was astonished. Pure ice peach? What is that? Seo Ho replied, It's a miraculous medicinal herb that can treat my special constitution. Yong Am worried, But we have countless precious medicines at the manor. Why use something unknown like this? Seo Ho shook his head. Ordinary medicines have no effect on me, because my constitution is completely different. Then Seo Ho revealed the truth about his body. I possess a rare constitution called the Yin Dragon Body, an extremely rare condition with incredibly strong innate yin energy. If it were a woman, she could reach the pinnacle of martial arts with it. But for a man like me, the yin energy will clash with my innate yang energy, causing me to die young. The only way to avoid that fate is to absorb a potent yin-natured medicinal herb during adolescence to completely transform the body. In my previous life, I discovered this too late. By then, there was no chance of obtaining the pure ice peach. Yang Am clenched his fists. Please explain more clearly. But Seo Ho just shook his head. This time, just trust me. Don't ask any more questions. He bowed his head, earnestly pleading. Seeing that look, Yang Am sighed. All right, even though you're as stubborn as ever. With that, he quickly moved to find the fruit. Seo Ho stood silently in the wind and snow, lost in thought. He thought to himself, I must become strong enough so that no one has to sacrifice themselves for me anymore. A few days later, Seo Ho suddenly became very lively, greeting the staff in the manor. Good morning, everyone. Although some still responded coldly, it was clear Seo Ho was full of vitality. Meanwhile, Yang Am looked visibly tired, even coughing slightly from the recent trip. The staff in the manor began to whisper among themselves. The young master has grown noticeably taller lately. A female merchant exclaimed. His face has changed too. He's the most handsome in the manor now. Truly the most handsome man I've ever seen. Another person remarked, His way of speaking sounds much more mature and composed. The strange atmosphere around them made Yang Am speak up. Get to work, stop gossiping. Afterwards, everyone discovered that Seo Ho had eaten the miraculous fruit. It had completely transformed his body, enhancing both his physical constitution and internal strength. When the transformation ended, Seo Ho opened his eyes. Then he whispered to his two close confidants, Keep this a secret. Although Seo Ho tried to hide it, both of them realized he had completely changed. While the three were talking, Yang Am joked, As long as the young master is healthy, that's all that matters. But if you get sick again, I'll really kill you. In the finance wing, official Ao Trang U was dumbstruck, staring at a huge pile of completed documents before him, so shocked he couldn't utter a word. He kept repeating in amazement, I can't believe Seo Ho could handle that much work in just 2 hours. Before him was a towering stack of papers, files that needed checking and processing, which should have taken at least 2 days to complete. The finance official carefully picked up a file, flipping through the pages suspiciously, then muttered, This should have taken at least 2 days. Seo Ho replied calmly, though with a slight hesitation, Actually, I didn't rewrite everything from scratch. I only prepared the summaries, he said with a gentle smile, as if it were nothing difficult. But internally, Seo Ho immediately felt regret. He told himself it would have been better to pretend to be a bit more clumsy, as his document processing skills came from extensive experience in his previous life. Just then, the finance official leaned in, addressing him respectfully as young master, then softly wanted to offer some important advice. Even the smallest task in the finance wing, he said, must be handled with absolute care. The flow of financial information within the organization, he continued, his eyes sharp, is like blood in the human body. If an error occurs, the consequences will be catastrophic. Seo Ho immediately understood the underlying meaning, silently guessing if he was suspecting that finishing too quickly meant doing a sloppy or inaccurate job. Indeed, the finance official replied bluntly, You completed the work unusually fast. That makes me unable to not be suspicious. He didn't forget to bring up the past, how Seo Ho had once dozed off while working, and even punched the head of internal affairs. That memory made him even more skeptical of Seo-ho's abilities. Seo-ho clearly read the doubtful expression on his face, thinking to himself, everything he thinks is written all over his face. No need to guess. At this point, Seo-ho smiled confidently, deciding to make a bold proposal. How about we make a bet to verify the quality of the work? The official's eyes widened, surprised, asking, "A bet? What do you mean?" Seo-ho calmly said, "I will take all the documents to the head of internal affairs, Yusaka. If he approves, I win. If he rejects, I lose." The finance official laughed contemptuously. "Ha! You think the head of internal affairs will praise this pile of papers? He'll be furious." But then he nodded. "All right, a lesson will make you less arrogant. What's the bet?" Seo-ho casually replied, "Whoever loses will have to process the remaining paperwork for the day," then smiled brightly, "and must perform the Ohai dance at my eldest brother's appointment ceremony." Hearing that, the official was stunned, wondering if he was joking or serious, his expression unable to hide his confusion. However, he still accepted the bet, challenging Seo-ho not to back out. Seo-ho laughed loudly, agreeing immediately. At that moment, another official in the finance wing named Asung quickly spoke up, advising, "You two, calm down a bit, don't get so agitated." But the finance official shouted, "Don't meddle in men's affairs," making Asung indignant. "I am your senior and the highest-ranking person here." Undeterred, Seo-ho and finance official Aotrang-woo decided to immediately go see Yusaka, the head of internal affairs, to settle the bet. When Yusaka received the documents, he frowned sternly and asked, "Did you really complete all these documents yourself? Documents that even the winghead struggled with?" Seo-ho maintained his composure, smiling confidently. Meanwhile, the finance official's expression changed drastically, showing shock and disbelief. "Head of Internal Affairs, please take another look," he protested. "I'm sure there must be some mistake." Official Aotrang-woo began to wail in desperation. How could a newcomer like the young master handle everything so perfectly? Yusaka coldly approached and smacked him hard on the head. "Are your glasses just for show?" Seo-ho stood by, thinking to himself, Aotrang-woo isn't incompetent. It's just that Yusaka's standards are excessively strict. Then Seo-ho stepped closer to Aotrang-woo, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. He smiled friendly. "I'm looking forward to your Ohai dance." Aotrang-woo immediately called out, trying to stop Seo-ho, but Seo-ho just turned away, closing the door gently. A moment later, Seo-ho stepped out with a satisfied expression, his heart filled with pride. But immediately a cold voice rang out. "Looking at your face, it's really infuriating." The voice continued, full of criticism. "You always cause trouble for father and eldest brother because of your weak health, yet you can still smile." That person was none other than his second older brother, Jin-ho, who coldly called out, "You're truly a nuisance." Suddenly, the image of Jin-ho lying dead in his past life's memory surfaced in Seo-ho's mind, causing a pang in his heart. Seo-ho turned around, softly calling his brother's name in a warm tone. "Jin-ho." Jin-ho was slightly taken aback by the gentle gaze and unusually tender attitude, confusedly asking, "What's wrong? What trick are you trying to pull? Do you want to die?" Seo-ho understood that at this point, the relationship between them was still very bad, so such a reaction from Jin-ho was inevitable. Jin-ho then said seriously, "I object to you learning commerce. With your health like this, if you get involved in business, father will worry even more." Seo-ho silently nodded. He understood the good intentions in his brother's words. Jin-ho was absolutely right. Jin-ho angrily snapped, "When you meet father later, don't pretend to be sick. If you faint like last time, I'll personally deal with you." Seo-ho smiled gently, sincerely reassuring his brother. "I'll be careful. I won't let that happen again this time." Jin-ho frowned, "I hate you," then turned and walked away without looking back. The door slammed shut. This was the first time Seo-ho had met his father and brother after returning to the past. As he was walking, Seo-ho's cane suddenly fell to the ground. He paused, lost in thought for a moment. Seo-ho smiled faintly to himself, then decided it was time to show them his true abilities. Suddenly, memories from his past life flooded back. painful images of the finance district engulfed in fierce flames. In that disaster, the fire had claimed the life of a young official on duty. Not only lives, but all documents were also incinerated in the sea of fire. That caused severe losses for the entire corporation, creating a major shock no one could have anticipated. Seo-ho understood. The fire that year was not merely an accident, but a deliberate, carefully calculated arson by someone in the shadows. Immediately, he returned to the finance district and found finance official Ao Trang-woo still engrossed in his work, completely unguarded. Seo-ho knew that if he wanted to prevent this tragedy, he needed to act freely, decisively, and resolutely from now on. Finance official Ao Trang-woo noticed Seo-ho's strange gaze. He asked why he was looking at him like that, but Seo-ho just smiled, replied that it was nothing, then silently walked inside. It was also at that moment that Seo-ho realized if he wanted to change the future, he had to change how others perceived him. That evening, the members of the Manhwa Trading Guild clan gathered at the family residence. Everyone gathered around a large dining table laden with delicious food. The atmosphere was initially very quiet. The eldest brother, Jung-ho, spoke first, asking his second younger brother Jin-ho about the work situation at the Sunset District, comparing it as completely different from the Breeze District. Jin-ho replied casually, saying that work in the Sunset District suited him better because he preferred manual labor over thinking with his head. Seo-ho, the youngest brother, just sat quietly listening, not saying a word. Then the eldest brother turned to Seo-ho and asked if he had started his internship in the finance district yet. Seo-ho politely replied that he had. The eldest brother gently advised Seo-ho not to rush, to learn slowly, worried that his younger brother might overwork himself. Seo-ho replied with a gentle smile, saying he knew his limits and wouldn't exceed them, remembering that his eldest brother had always been kind and considerate to him, even in the past. But suddenly, the painful memory of his eldest brother in his previous life returned, shocking Seo-ho. He silently swore that he would absolutely never want to witness that heartbreaking image again in this life. Sadness and bitterness welled up in his heart, and he told himself, "I will definitely not let that tragedy repeat itself." Unexpectedly, Jin-ho interjected in an annoyed tone, dismissing his younger brother's words as nonsense. He heavily mocked Seo-ho, saying he talked as if he understood himself well, while all he did was lie in bed and take medicine. Eldest brother Young-ho immediately objected, sternly reprimanding Jin-ho for speaking too harshly. But Jin-ho was still angry, believing Seo-ho had become arrogant and lacked self-awareness because he was always overly protected by their eldest brother. Then he jumped up, loudly asking everyone how much longer they had to sacrifice and exhaust themselves, caring for someone who only brought burdens to the family. The eldest brother could no longer restrain himself, angrily shouting that Jin-ho had crossed the line. Jin-ho retorted sharply, saying everyone in the family knew Seo-ho's condition, weak, coughing up blood, needing a cane to walk. He then mockingly asked what Seo-ho could possibly do for the Manhwa Trading Guild with such a constitution. Although mentally an adult, Seo-ho was still deeply hurt by those harsh words. Instead of avoiding it, Seo-ho suddenly turned, looked Jin-ho straight in the eye, and called his name decisively. Jin-ho snapped, telling Seo-ho not to call him like that, but Seo-ho calmly spoke softly, saying they should stop the argument. He pointed to the door, reminding them that father was about to arrive and wouldn't be pleased to see this scene. The eldest brother nodded in agreement, saying everyone should calm down. Meanwhile, Young-ho pondered the strange change in his youngest brother. He realized Seo-ho today seemed very different, more mature, calmer. His train of thought was interrupted by the sound of their father's footsteps, announced by a servant. Seo-ho immediately looked up, his wary gaze fixed on the entrance. He spoke softly, his voice low and serious, greeting his father. Their father, Eun-jil-sung, entered the room, gently apologizing for being late due to a long meeting. The eldest brother smiled, replying that they had only just arrived, so it was nothing serious. But immediately after, the father's gaze landed on Seo-ho's flushed face, worriedly asking if he was sick or if something was wrong. Seo-ho answered awkwardly, trying to hide his emotions, saying it was nothing serious. But deep down, he knew why his face was red. It was because the painful memory of witnessing his father's death in his previous life was still deeply etched in his heart. He remembered vividly his father's pained face as he drew his last breath. At that time, his father, Unjil Sung, seeing his son seem to have something to say, gently asked him if he had anything to share. Seo-ho hesitated for a moment, trying to remain calm, reminding himself that the person before him now was his father when he was younger, not the heartbreaking image in his memory. He told himself to control his emotions, not to let the past dictate the present, and to focus on the goal he had set. He understood that what had happened before had not yet occurred in this life, and he still had time to change everything. Seo-ho took a deep breath, calmed his mind, then looked up with determined eyes. He smiled faintly, admitting that his father had guessed correctly and confessed that he indeed had something very important to say. The sudden answer surprised both his father and brother. His father looked at Seo-ho with a surprised expression, waiting for him to continue. Then he asked everyone to sit still, telling Seo-ho to calmly sit down to talk things through. Seo-ho immediately agreed. Seo-ho slowly recounted to his father an old conversation, a conversation that had taken place long before he began training in the finance division. Back then, his father had said that due to Seo-ho's weak constitution, he was not allowed to take on full work responsibilities, but should only grasp the overview to understand the business model. But this time, Seo-ho looked straight at his father with a stern gaze and questioned whether that arrangement was truly correct, because he believed that sooner or later, the day would come when he himself would have to lead all the members in this division. Junho, the older brother sitting nearby, couldn't hide his surprise upon hearing those strong words from Seo-ho, silently wondering what had caused his younger brother to change so much. The father remained silent for a moment, then nodded, admitting that what his son had just said made sense. He got straight to the point, wanting to know exactly what Seo-ho was trying to say. Without hesitation, Seo-ho replied with a determined expression that he wanted to be treated fairly like his brothers and other members in the division, including participating in night shifts. But the father immediately rejected that proposal decisively, his voice stern, asserting that he would not approve it. Seo-ho stood motionless, almost stunned by this sudden refusal, momentarily unsure how to react. However, he quickly regained his composure and asked his father if this refusal was perhaps too harsh. The father became even stricter, explaining that there were things that couldn't be done even if one wanted to, especially night shifts, which required staying awake all night to manage security, something Seo-ho's constitution absolutely did not allow. He emphasized once again that Seo-ho could take on other tasks in the division, but night shifts were strictly forbidden. Though outwardly silent and listening, Seo-ho completely rejected that decision in his heart, because he knew very well that it was during that fateful night shift that a fire would break out, and he needed to be there to prevent it. Therefore, Seo-ho decided to stand up and resist. He looked his father straight in the eye and asked if he could prove his physical ability was sufficient to endure night shifts. Would he change his decision? The father was momentarily astonished, then burst into mocking laughter, asking with a jeer how Seo-ho could prove that. Seo-ho did not waver. He replied confidently that he would challenge his older brother Jin-ho to a duel. The entire room fell silent, stunned by the proposal. Jin-ho, the brother who was challenged, looked at him with disbelief. The father also couldn't hide his surprise, completely caught off guard by the strange idea his youngest son had just proposed. Jin-ho suddenly exploded in anger, turning to look at Seo-ho with eyes burning like fire, shouting loudly, "Are you crazy? What do you think you're doing?" But Seo-ho just smiled confidently, looked straight at his brother and asked, "Or are you scared? Scared that you might lose to me?" The eldest brother, Jung-ho, could no longer stand by. He stepped forward, utterly stunned by the challenge, then questioned Seo-ho, "What did you just say?" Seo-ho replied calmly, his eyes determined, saying that if everyone was worried about his health, then reassuring them was also a form of filial piety. He added, emphasizing that he knew Jin-ho had recently become a first-class martial artist, and if he could endure facing someone like that, it would be enough to prove he could handle all responsibilities in the finance division. Jinho was silent for a moment, moved by his younger brother's words. Then he admitted that Seoho's reasoning was indeed very persuasive. Afterwards, he turned to his father and asked for permission to proceed with the duel. The eldest brother tried to protest, but Jinho quickly cut him off and directly asked their father for permission. The father, after a moment of contemplation, silently nodded in agreement. Jung-ho was surprised by his father's decision, but the father maintained his stance. He said that Seoho needed to learn to take responsibility for his words and actions. He further emphasized that everyone in life has to go through challenges, and now was the right time to test Seoho. Seoho clearly saw in his father's eyes that he didn't believe he could beat Jinho. But to Seoho, that was natural, and he was prepared for it. The father then set the conditions for the match. He clearly stated that the gap between Seoho and Jinho was enormous. If Seoho could last for one round, he would allow him to take on full responsibilities, including night shifts. Then he asked, "Can you do it?" Seoho bowed deeply, replying respectfully, "Thank you, father, for giving me this opportunity." The eldest brother, Jung-ho, stood beside him, his face clearly showing worry. He kept sighing from stress and felt this situation was truly too dangerous. He seriously advised his younger brother, "If the match becomes too dangerous, surrender. There's no shame in it." But Seoho just smiled calmly and replied, "I don't think that will be necessary." Meanwhile, Jinho's expression grew increasingly dark, his anger evident in the sharp gaze he fixed on his younger brother. The match began in the vast training square. Seoho and Jinho stood facing each other, preparing for an uneven fight. The surrounding soldiers and guards were astonished to see Seoho step onto the dueling platform. One of them exclaimed, "Not long ago, he couldn't even stand steadily." But Seoho just smiled faintly, signaling them to keep quiet, to remain calm. A servant whispered reassuringly to head guard Yang Am, "He'll be fine, I hope so." In the distance, Jung-ho stood beside his father, quietly asking if his father wasn't worried about Seoho. But he just shook his head calmly. "I don't see anything to worry about." Jung-ho spoke again, his eyes full of worry. "Jinho has always looked down on Seoho. He might not hold back in this match." Their father heard this and merely sank into thought. It all began with a direct confrontation between the two brothers. Seoho entered the arena calmly, deciding to observe before making a move. Meanwhile, Jinho looked completely serious, full of anger and ready to fight. A few guards and soldiers standing nearby couldn't hide their astonishment. They silently thought this whole family must have gone mad with this bizarre duel. Head guard Yang Am, however, grew increasingly uneasy. A suspicion arose in his heart that young Master Seoho was being manipulated by some mysterious force. At that moment, their father, Eun-jil-sung, gave a decisive order to start the match by ringing the bell. The soldier in charge hesitated for a moment, then asked again to confirm. The guard hesitated, his face full of worry about the potential danger. But then he decided to follow the order enthusiastically, silently hoping in his heart that the youngest brother would be the victor. Jinho stepped into the center of the courtyard, his eyes glinting with anger as he saw his younger brother. He couldn't hide his surging resentment, snapping at Seoho, "You never understand your true place in this family." His voice was full of bitterness. "You were born the pampered youngest son, loved and coddled by everyone, as if the whole world had to obey your commands." Meanwhile, Seoho said nothing. He just remained silent, calm, ready for the upcoming battle. His eyes as cold as daggers, Jinho thought to himself. Since childhood, he's been pampered to the point of thinking everything is beneath him. He clenched his fists, resolved in his heart. "As your older brother, today I will teach you a lesson you'll never forget." With that, he lunged forward, delivering a powerful blow towards his younger brother. But unexpectedly, in that instant, a memory surfaced in Jinho's mind. It was when they were young, people often joked that he couldn't take his eyes off Seoho, simply because he admired his little brother so much. Another memory flooded back. The first time he touched his younger brother's tiny hand when he was just born. And he clearly remembered his father's words then. "He's still very young. You're the older brother. You must always protect your younger brother." He had looked at the baby for a long time, his eyes innocent and pure. At that time, he had silently promised to follow his father's words. But now Jin-ho had rejected that role in his heart. Why is it always me who has to take care of him? Why am I the only one responsible? He gritted his teeth, his eyes blazing. Father always wants me and eldest brother to be model older brothers, while Seo-ho is allowed to act like a spoiled brat. Unable to bear it any longer, Jin-ho growled through gritted teeth, "I won't tolerate this for another second." Then he continued to charge, his attack even stronger than before. Meanwhile, Seo-ho remained extremely calm, carefully calculating how much strength he should use to confront his older brother. Just then, Seo-ho began to move, using a high-level dueling technique called snow flow steps. He glided with such speed and lightness that it stunned everyone. Jin-ho was completely shaken. He couldn't keep up with his younger brother's movements, a sense of bewilderment welling up inside him. The father, the eldest brother, and all the guards were stunned. No one expected Seo-ho to be able to execute such a technique. But unexpectedly, Seo-ho seemed to stumble while moving. That action startled and worried everyone. Then he fell down comically, rolling on the ground, laughing and saying, "I was just trying a new technique I learned. Who knew I'd trip on the floor? Lucky me, I almost took your full blow, brother." That teasing act enraged Jin-ho. He roared in his heart, "Is he toying with me?" In his fury, Jin-ho lunged forward with even greater speed and power, delivering another fierce blow towards Seo-ho. But Seo-ho still lightly dodged everything, as if dancing in the wind, his calmness further surprising everyone. The eldest brother couldn't believe his eyes, turning to his father and asking with a stunned expression, "Father, how can that kid do these tricks?" The father sighed softly, recalling the advice he had given Jin-ho earlier. He had warned him never to underestimate his younger brother's words. If he dared to propose a duel, it meant he had thought it through very carefully. And now, he affirmed in his heart that Seo-ho was the greatest genius in the history of the Nhat-Hai Trading Guild. Despite believing in Seo-ho's abilities, he couldn't help but be amazed at the level he was displaying, especially since Jin-ho hadn't yet unleashed his full strength. What stunned him more was Seo-ho's endurance when facing Jin-ho, who was always considered a first-class expert, while Seo-ho had previously suffered from a balance disorder. He thought to himself, if he were taught by a true master, how much stronger would he be? But then, his worry was no longer for Seo-ho, but shifted to Jin-ho, his son who was gradually losing his composure. Jin-ho felt desperate, angrily screaming in his heart, "Why can't I touch him?" In his emotional turmoil, Jin-ho suddenly remembered what people used to say, that Seo-ho was the #1 genius in the history of the corporation. It was like rubbing salt in his wounds. Memories flooded back. When he saw Seo-ho fall gravely ill, coughing up blood in fits that terrified him, he stood frozen, unable to do anything. Witnessing it firsthand, Jin-ho could only watch his younger brother from afar, his heart full of worry. At that time, his father said he could no longer continue training Seo-ho, and would entrust this task to the head of the Foreign Affairs Department. Jin-ho had tried to protest, begging his father that he wanted to be trained personally under his guidance. But his father dismissed it, saying Seo-ho was gravely ill and needed care, while Jin-ho had to assume the responsibilities of an older brother. Seo-ho was in critical condition at that time, writhing in pain. When Jin-ho worriedly asked what had happened, those around him said they needed to stop the bleeding immediately, and asked what he had eaten. At that moment, Jin-ho began to tremble, tears welling up from guilt. Everything came to light. He had accidentally given his younger brother a spiritual medicine containing excessively strong yang energy, worsening his condition. Jin-ho sobbed, kneeling before his father, endlessly apologizing. "I just wanted my brother to get well soon." But his father, in a fit of anger, pushed him away forcefully without a word. Jin-ho collapsed, shocked by that cold reaction. His father completely ignored him. Then he overheard the physicians discussing that, even if he survived, Seo-ho's internal organ damage would be very severe. All those memories flooded back, plunging Jin-ho into a mix of hatred and guilt amidst the current battle. He blamed himself. It all started with his innate weakness. In his rage, Jin-ho roared in his heart, "Why do I have to endure all of this just because of you?" Just then their weapons clashed, emitting a harsh sound. Seo-ho looked at him, his voice calm. "Family is a very complicated thing." Seo-ho continued, his eyes still fixed on Jin-ho. "Because the bond between brothers is so strong, harboring resentment is inevitable even if you live together your whole life." That statement stunned Jin-ho. He widened his eyes, angrily asking back, What do you mean by that?" Seo-ho gently explained it was just advice he had heard before, but Jin-ho didn't bother to pay any more attention, just continued to attack fiercely once more. Just then, the eldest brother worriedly wondered how much time was left until the match ended, and his guard replied with a tense expression that there were only 9 seconds left. The anger within Jin-ho erupted violently. He unleashed a powerful surge of energy from his sword as he prepared his next attack. Jin-ho growled, speaking to Seo-ho with anger and agitation, accusing his younger brother of continuing to speak nonsense, then emphasized that things wouldn't be easy anymore. The eldest brother's eyes widened at what he was witnessing. He shouted, trying to stop Jin-ho, ordering him to stop immediately and set aside his personal feelings. But Jin-ho didn't listen. He poured all his strength and anger into the attack, lunging forward with all his terrifying power. In that moment, Seo-ho whispered to himself in a completely calm voice that Jin-ho truly knew nothing about the real truth. Then Seo-ho suddenly remembered the words his brother had said in their previous life, that family relationships were inherently complex and hatred could remain in the heart, even among blood relatives. At the same time, Jin-ho also got lost in his memories, thinking that when a person lives too long in hatred, they forget the original reason for their hate. He confessed to himself that his hatred for Seo-ho was just like that. He confessed that deep down he felt helpless, angry, and filled with guilt, because he could do nothing, and the family always favored Seo-ho more. In a painful memory, Jin-ho whispered an apology to his younger brother, Seo-ho. He honestly said he truly regretted that those feelings had weighed him down his entire life, even though it was entirely not Seo-ho's fault. And then a final pain-laden scene from the past emerged. Jin-ho silently begged his younger brother never to forgive him for what had happened. "Never forgive me for everything." Seo-ho returned to reality just as Jin-ho was lunging to attack, and Jin-ho himself suddenly wondered in his heart how everything could possibly be Seo-ho's fault alone. As he charged like a storm, he repeated that question in his mind. How could he blame only him for everything? Suddenly, Seo-ho dropped his weapon, completely defenseless, deliberately receiving his brother's attack and declaring that they had all been childish and immature in the past. This action stunned all who witnessed it, including the father and the eldest brother. Jin-ho was utterly shocked to see Seo-ho voluntarily drop his weapon. But Seo-ho just smiled calmly, telling Jin-ho that his current attack was essentially the same one he used at the beginning, just with added sword energy. Jin-ho continued to think to himself that no matter what, he still couldn't forgive Jin-ho for what had happened. However, he had decided that this was enough for this confrontation. Jin-ho still stood frozen, unable to continue his attack as he was lost in thought about Seo-ho's unexpected action. Meanwhile, the guards and the eldest brother were still too shocked, so much so that the female guard holding the hourglass didn't even notice. But right after, she still announced that time was up, and there was no clear winner in the 10-minute match, so she asked who was the winner of the bet. Seo-ho stepped forward confidently and declared that the winner of the duel was the youngest young master, referring to himself. The scene shifts to the finance wing, where officials are discussing Seo-ho's victory, a victory still kept secret from the public. While reviewing documents prepared by Seo-ho, one of the officials was very impressed with his ability to organize and coordinate data. Then, with a cunning look in his eyes, this official proposed that Seo-ho should be appointed as his personal assistant and work 24 hours a day. The final scene shows Jin-ho practicing alone, trying to dispel his frustration and resentment through each sword stroke in the training yard. Swinging his sword powerfully, Jin-ho tried to vent his anger on the turmoil still burning within him after the confrontation with his younger brother, Seo-ho. While practicing, Jin-ho recalled painful memories of when his younger brother was gravely ill and bedridden, bringing back the feelings of helplessness and guilt from years ago. Jin-ho also remembered another scene when the whole family was anxiously gathered around Seo-ho's sickbed, while he could only stand silently watching from afar. Meanwhile, Seo-ho was calmly talking to himself, saying that family relationships were always incredibly complex. Jin-ho threw his sword hard onto the ground, panting from exhaustion, extreme anger, and pain. Then he admitted honestly that he was very angry. However, even though the anger remained, he felt a strange sense of relief after confronting Seo-ho. Afterwards, Jin-ho approached one of the maids and asked what his younger brother Seo-ho was doing at that moment. The servant replied with a worried tone that Seo-ho had just been summoned by the head of internal affairs. Jin-ho was surprised and confused, not understanding why, while Seo-ho appeared in a closed room, looking around bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Then the head of internal affairs, Yusaka, walked in with a sinister smile, announcing that there were rumors Seo-ho could finally start taking on real responsibilities. Seo-ho replied somewhat tensely, admitting that was technically true, but still wondered if something was amiss. Just then, Yusaka's assistant, Choi Duong, entered, bringing with her a person who was screaming and struggling violently. Yusaka smiled sinisterly, declaring that from today, Seo-ho was officially his assistant, and this had been approved by the Nahat High Trading Guild's leadership, so he shouldn't even dream of resisting. At that very moment, Seo-ho recalled an event from his previous life. Yusaka's death stemmed from overwork and complete exhaustion. Yusaka began to explain to Seo-ho the tasks he would have to undertake, including managing the corporation's finances, reviewing documents and loans, preparing budgets and weekly reports, an enormous burden. Seo-ho was completely shocked by the amount of work awaiting him. Assistant Choi Duong tried to gently reassure Seo-ho, saying he didn't need to worry too much. She told Seo-ho that he would soon come to love this work, just as she once did. But Seo-ho immediately refused confidently, insisting that would never happen. Internally, Seo-ho explained to himself that if he agreed to be Yusaka's assistant, he wouldn't be able to leave the office before midnight every day. And worst of all, he wouldn't be able to carry out his main mission, preventing the fire he knew would definitely happen in the finance district. In his past life's memories, Seo-ho vividly remembered the scene of Yusaka's former assistant, fleeing in terror from exhaustion, and there was no guarantee he wouldn't suffer the same fate if he accepted this position. Seo-ho felt fear rising within him, afraid that he too would break down like the other person, so he resolved to do everything possible to avoid that prospect. Seo-ho turned to face Yusaka, seriously presenting his arguments to decline the assistant position. Seo-ho began to present his viewpoint, saying he believed the true purpose of training lay not in the current work, but in a comprehensive understanding of the management process. While he had only just begun training 2 days ago, Seo-ho continued to suggest to the head of internal affairs that a more capable person should be chosen for this position, emphasizing that he himself only wished to learn routine tasks and did not want any special privileges. Yusaka remained silent in thought for a moment, especially after Seo-ho mentioned that the assistant to the head of internal affairs usually didn't take night shifts, while night shifts were a crucial part of the job that clearly reflected the arduous reality of administrative work. After a moment of contemplation, Yusaka smiled faintly and said he completely understood what Seo-ho wanted to convey and thanked him for sharing frankly. But then suddenly, he gave an enigmatic smile and declared that Seo-ho would handle both routine work and night shifts, leaving Seo-ho so stunned he could barely believe his ears. A sense of bewilderment and horror arose in Seo-ho's heart upon hearing the head of internal affairs, Yusaka, coldly announce his new duties. In extreme panic, Seo-ho decided to flee the place immediately, causing the guards to shout in unison, demanding he be stopped. Members of the Junhee Trading Guild's Fongback Silver Wind armed squad quickly rushed over, grabbing Seo-ho tightly and stopping him just before he could escape the hall. 3 days later, a notice was publicly posted with the list of those on night duty that day, including Iwuchang Iwi and Jun Xiaohao. Upon seeing the notice, Seo-ho suddenly remembered that tonight was the night of the Great Fire in the finance district. At the same time, Yu Chanyong suddenly appeared, silently approaching, holding a file, his expression calm as if nothing was wrong. As soon as he saw Yu Chanyong, Seo-ho immediately recalled the accident that had killed him, which also happened during a night shift, and felt relieved that he had managed to remember that important detail. However, at that moment, Seo-ho was experiencing such extreme fatigue that he just wanted to collapse on the spot due to the work pressure crushing his mind and body. Seo-ho silently thought about how he had been forced to take stimulants that merchants of the Ion 2 Corporation often used to stay awake, and it felt like every day he was pushing past his own limits of endurance. Although the internal energy absorbed from the pure ice peach had helped Seo-ho overcome some fatigue, the relentless workload kept increasing, making him wonder if Yusaka was deliberately trying to drown him in paperwork. Meanwhile, Seo-ho kept reminding himself that he needed to get out of this place before he turned into a workaholic, like Yusaka's previous assistant, Yang, who always smiled and asked for more work as if it were the best thing in the world. Seo-ho turned to talk to Yu Chanyong. "I'm counting on you for tonight's shift," he said, and Yu Chanyong calmly replied, "I'm counting on you too." Seo-ho thought to himself, "First I have to survive tonight." Late at night, as Seo-ho was engrossed in processing files, Yu Chanyong walked in and suggested, "Let's have a cup of tea and then start our shift." Seo-ho shook his head. "No thanks, I'm fine. I don't want anything to drink." Both then sat in silence for a long time, engrossed in their work. Suddenly, Seo-ho broke the silence and called Yu Chanyong. "Do you have anything you want to say to me?" he asked. Yu Chanyong replied, "I don't understand what you're talking about." Seo-ho smiled faintly. "It's nothing, just asking." After that, Yu Chanyong decided to go check one of the area rooms by himself. Seo-ho was a bit surprised by his insistence on checking it himself. After Yu Chanyong left, Seo-ho called his bodyguard's name, Yang Am. But there was no response. He guessed she must have fallen asleep. Suddenly, Yang Am appeared, perched high up in the room, surprising and perplexing Seo-ho with her strange choice of spot. He gently asked, "Would you like to come down and have some tea with me?" Yang Am was a bit surprised by the invitation, but then happily nodded. After drinking the tea, Yang Am frowned. "It's a bit bitter. Did you brew it for too long?" But after only a few minutes, the effects of the sleeping drug began to take hold. She slumped down, fast asleep on the floor, while Seo-ho watched, whispering, "I'm sure there was a sleeping drug in the tea." Seo-ho felt extremely tired seeing Yang Am fall into a deep sleep. A desire to sleep like her welled up inside him. But despite his exhaustion, Seo-ho was determined to begin inspecting the entire area. And then, while patrolling, a strange figure appeared, stealthily moving near the finance district. Seo-ho immediately identified him. "He's the arsonist. Tonight I'll catch him red-handed." As the man moved, something in his hand fell to the ground, making a faint sound. He struck a match to light a fire, but unexpectedly, Seo-ho appeared from behind, mocking, "You seem quite excited, don't you?" The man jumped, startled, confused by Seo-ho's sudden appearance. However, with a lightning-fast movement, Seo-ho snatched the burning match from his hand before he could react. He held up the match, examining it, then calmly remarked, "Burns well, just like adding oil to the fire." Seo-ho disdainfully mocked the man for preparing so thoroughly for arson, his voice teasing, "You've prepared everything for this charade, haven't you? Very professional indeed." Then he looked straight into his eyes and called out his real name, Asung, stunning the man, who was a member of the fire wing, when his identity was exposed. Asung immediately exploded in anger, his voice roaring with fury. "How did you know who I am? How did you find out about this?" Seo-ho just smiled mockingly, asking back, "If I said I knew from the future, would you believe me?" Asung became serious, his eyes darkening. "You wouldn't tell the truth, would you?" But Seo-ho just shrugged, narrowing his eyes with a cold smile. "Honestly, does that even matter anymore?" With a chillingly calm demeanor, Seo-ho stated clearly, "What matters is that I caught you red-handed trying to commit arson. You can't deny it." Suddenly, Asung burst into maniacal laughter, the sound echoing in the quiet night. He laughed, panting. You're really sharp. The rumors about your intelligence don't seem to be exaggerated. But immediately he pulled out a knife, his face breaking into a vicious smile. Well, did you come here alone? Seo-ho remained playful, joking in response. I'm single, so I always go places alone. The teasing further enraged A-sung. He roared, Die, you bastard! Then lunged into a frenzied attack. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Iwoo-chung Iwi, holding a lantern, silently inspected the surrounding area with suspicion and unease. As he walked, he recalled a previous conversation with Seo-ho. Back then, Seo-ho had asked him, Do you have anything you want to say to me? But Iwoo-chung Iwi had refused at the time, just silently turning away. The scene shifts back to Yu Chanyong, who now looks Seo-ho straight in the eye and asks, How could you finish the work so quickly? With a confused expression, Yu Chanyong shook his head. I've worked in the finance wing for over 3 years and never finished work as early as you. Yet you completed it in just 2 days. He asked in surprise, Did you use some kind of magic? Zuho smiled gently. So that's why you were cold to me, huh? Yu Chanyong snapped, I wasn't cold at all. Zuho calmly replied, I don't think I'm anything special. I just try to do more than just complete the work for the sake of it. He added, I always try to understand the true intentions of the head of internal affairs behind every request. During the conversation with Iwoo-chung Iwi, Seo-ho chuckled lightly. Listening to me sounds like an old man. I learned these things from my father, Mr. Iwoo-chung. Iwoo-chung Iwi was both annoyed and impressed, unable to hide his mixed emotions at Seo-ho's capabilities. Seo-ho remained calm. Those feelings shouldn't be seen as negative. Use them as motivation to improve. Iwoo-chung Iwi smiled faintly. That's what my father used to teach as well. Then he turned away to continue his inspection. As Seo-ho asked, Are you going alone? Iwoo-chung Iwi nodded. Alone will be better. As he walked silently, Iwoo-chung Iwi wondered to himself why a newcomer like Seo-ho could astonish everyone like this. Could the future of the Junhee Trading Guild truly be in his hands? Thinking about it, he couldn't help but feel annoyed remembering the times Seo-ho had exasperated him. To calm himself, Iwoo-chung Iwi decided to drink a hot cup of tea, silently regretting having refused the tea Seo-ho offered earlier. As he was drinking tea, something unusual surprised him. He discovered an oil stain on one of the tools. This made him worried and suspicious. Meanwhile, the confrontation between Seo-ho and Ah-sung had become extremely tense. Ah-sung attacked with all his strength, but Seo-ho easily parried the blow, smiling confidently. This fight is much easier. He executed a high-level martial arts technique from the White Dragon Arts, a move called Bamboo Strike, making the fight seem as easy as turning over his hand. Ah-sung was completely stunned by Seo-ho's superior skill. In his mind, there was only one question. How can someone rumored to be weak and sickly like him be so strong? Even while enduring a barrage of blows, Ah-sung still couldn't understand what was happening. He mumbled, Is this rain? The scene shifts to Ah-sung's past, where he lived a miserable, aimless life. He shivered while playing mahjong, his heart full of anxiety, feeling his life was meaningless. In desperation, he told himself, If living is this meaningless, I might as well bet everything on this mahjong tile. But he lost again, causing his anger to explode, leading to a brawl with the other players. He roared, accusing them of cheating. You all rigged it, didn't you? As a result, Ah-sung was beaten down, sprawling on the ground, his mind vaguely thinking about his meaningless and dead-end life. Suddenly a mysterious person appeared, his voice contemptuous. Warrior Ah-sung, huh? You look pathetic now. Sung pleaded, I'll pay back the money. I'm from the finance wing of Junhee. I can earn it back. The mysterious man nodded. I know, you're good. Then he proposed, Let's work together again. As he lost consciousness, Ah-sung only felt everything was meaningless, despair engulfing his entire mind. But just before completely losing consciousness, he was hit hard by Seo-ho and screamed fiercely that he wasn't allowed to pass out at this moment. Seo-ho was now interrogating Ah-sung, who looked extremely exhausted and was coughing violently. He said in a frightening voice that Ah-sung was no longer human. Zuho continued to state clearly that during interrogation, he was only allowed to speak the truth, and demanded Ah-sung answer if he understood. However, Asung didn't answer immediately, angering Seo-ho, who shouted, demanding a clear answer at once. Time passed. It was now nearly 4 to 5 in the morning, the atmosphere growing heavier. Seo-ho stepped out into the large outer courtyard, facing the team leaders and members, bowing his head in apology for causing a disturbance in the middle of the night and hoping they understood it was all for a good reason. He announced that the news had been confirmed. The person who tried to set fire to the finance wing had been caught red-handed. Meanwhile, Asung appeared, tied tightly to a tree trunk suspended in midair, his whole body swaying, creating a terrifying deterrent scene. Seo-ho asserted that through investigation, all evidence showed that this plan was orchestrated by the Manhwa brothel. He added that the water wheel of the head of the Silent Wind Wing, Gyap Byung-chun, had played a key role in making Asung confess the whole truth. Asung had completely broken down by now. He could only cry and beg them to just end his life. Just then, Seo-ho's father appeared, his gaze stern but his voice calm. He asked clearly, without any hesitation, whether the Manhwa brothel was truly the culprit behind this incident. Seo-ho calmly replied that he was certain Asung had suffered a great shock and felt extremely betrayed. Afterwards, he explained that the Manhwa brothel was one of the 5 largest brothels in Hubei province and had long had a business relationship with the Junhee Trading Guild. The head of the Silent Wind Wing, Gyap Byung-chun, added that the Manhwa brothel owed a large sum of money to the guild and might have tried to destroy evidence by committing arson. At this point, the head of the Sunset Wing, Yundami, spoke up, saying that if the conspiracy had succeeded, it would have been very difficult to trace the culprit because many parties currently owed money to the guild. The head of the Foreign Affairs Department and captain of the Silver Wind Squad, Go Yu-pyung, expressed relief that everything had finally ended peacefully. Seo-ho stood there silently, contemplating the entire course of events, while others spared no praise, saying that if he hadn't discovered the fire in time, the consequences would have been dire. Deep down, Seo-ho knew very well that if he hadn't prevented guard Yu Chan-young from drinking that drugged tea, then that person would surely have been burned in the fire by now without knowing anything. Realizing the situation was becoming too flattering, Seo-ho proactively cut short the praise and emphasized that they needed to focus on the next step immediately. Go Yu-pyung then remarked that the boy, though very young, showed no arrogance. In fact, he immediately proposed the next course of action decisively, without any hesitation. Yundami also couldn't help but be surprised by Seo-ho's composure, especially after such a serious incident. She confirmed that he was indeed a rare talent. Suddenly, the head of internal affairs, Yusaka, requested Seo-ho to take Asung down from the tree because he felt he couldn't bear to look at the scene any longer. After all, he is still a human being. Seo-ho was stunned, not expecting to hear such words from Yusaka, but eventually nodded in agreement. When Asung was released, one of them kindly asked if he was okay, and Asung thanked the head of internal affairs for his kindness. But immediately after, Yusaka stunned everyone by suddenly hitting Asung hard in the face, saying that if he was still conscious, it meant he was strong enough to take more blows. Yusaka was extremely angry, hitting and scolding that it was because of this guy that he had to stay up all night. Seo-ho unexpectedly proposed to all the leaders and members of the Junhee Trading Guild that they should actually burn down the finance wing. Head of Internal Affairs Yusaka nearly went mad hearing that. He shouted in protest, but Go Yu-pyung intervened, requesting order and for everyone to listen to Seo-ho finish. The head of the Sunset Wing, Yundami, appeared impressed, remarking that the plan was indeed very bold and interesting. Seo-ho continued to present, emphasizing that they needed to use a lie to hide the truth, because a lie can make the truth ambiguous, and falsehoods can easily be mistaken for truth. Afterwards, he explained the plan in more detail. Specifically, they needed to make the Manhwa brothel believe that the plot to burn down the finance wing had actually succeeded. Only then would they potentially reveal their true objective and next actions. The team leaders all agreed with Seo-ho's plan, except for the head of internal affairs who still resolutely opposed it, arguing it was crazy to burn a building just for a lie. But since the majority supported it, They eventually decided to actually burn down the finance wing. In a dramatic scene, the fire blazed fiercely. The building engulfed in flames while Seo-ho walked silently amidst Yusaka's horrified screams. All important documents and bodyguard Yang-am had been moved to safety beforehand. Seo-ho stood there, silently watching the building engulfed in red flames, a scene that had occurred in his previous life. But this time, he felt he was in control of everything. He told himself that this fire would not be a downfall, but the beginning of a new step forward for the trading guild. However, a hint of regret still arose in his heart when he saw Yusaka collapse, despairing at the thought of the enormous reconstruction costs. Afterwards, Seo-ho asked an employee about the deadline for the debt the Lin Hoa brothel owed, and was told the deadline was next month, on Buddha's birthday. Seo-ho smiled, saying to let the issue hang until then, and for now they would raise capital from other sources. 1 month later, at one of the largest brothels in Hubei province, a group of people were excitedly discussing the great fire that had occurred at the Junhee Trading Guild. They were both surprised and curious about the cause of the fire. Someone whispered that it seemed all contracts and documents related to the Lien Hoa brothel had been completely incinerated. Some suggested that the group was just using the fire as an excuse to avoid paying their debts. Just then, the general manager of the Lien Hoa brothel, Seo So-chang, appeared, his face extremely annoyed, knowing full well that burning documents couldn't help them escape the debt they owed. He decided to step in to stop the situation, immediately going inside to find the owner of the brothel. But unexpectedly, he was utterly stunned to see the owner surrounded by a group of courtesans. Seeing that, Seo So-chang immediately flew into a rage. He loudly questioned, asking if there hadn't been a ban from the previous owner. Why was he repeating the offense? However, the owner of the brothel, Bak, cut him off sharply, telling him to get straight to the point. Immediately after, Bak spoke in a threatening tone, saying he was making him want to kill someone. Internally, Seo So-chang thought it was time for him to resign because the current leader was truly useless. However, he remained calm, frankly stating that he had heard news about him intending to default on the debt with the Junhee Corporation, even though destroying documents couldn't exempt them from their obligations to a long-term partner. Bak, owner of the Lien Hoa brothel, appeared indifferent, saying coldly that the debt had existed for a very long time. If the Junhee Corporation really cared, they would have acted sooner, ordering the manager to leave the room. But Seo So-chang still hesitated and objected. He said that Junhee hadn't said anything at all, which angered Bak excessively, who ordered him to leave immediately. Seo So-chang painfully retorted, saying that the previous owner would never have behaved like this. Bak then called Seo So-chang closer, gesturing for him to approach, which made him uneasy, but he still complied. As Seo So-chang approached, Bak began to rummage for something beside him. Then suddenly Bak smashed a glass bottle on Seo So-chang's head, cursing in a fit of rage. Seo So-chang fell to the floor, suffocating in pain, while Bak roared fiercely. Who was truly the master of this brothel, him or his father? He continued to scream, complaining that all the manager did was obstruct him. Afterwards, Bak sat back down in his chair, sneered, and said that after resolving the current matter, he would deal with the Junhee merchants. He turned to a courtesan who was trembling with fear. Then, smiling, he said that the Junhee group's demands were really troublesome. But anyway, they also served the Tin Bak Corporation, one of the 3 largest trading corporations under the Muram Alliance. Bak continued with a cunning smile that once this job was done, no one would dare compare him to his father anymore, and he wouldn't need to work with Junhee either. He even laughed loudly, adding that he might even wipe out the Junhee Corporation. Just then a servant hurriedly entered, bowing and apologizing for intruding, but said there was something very urgent. The servant, Junjae, announced that the Junhee Trading Corporation had arrived at the brothel, and even brought guards. Bak was shaken, not understanding how they could arrive so unexpectedly. Seo-ho appeared at the door, accompanied by members of his group, surprised that no one stopped them even though they hadn't announced their arrival. A member sneered, mocking that perhaps this brothel didn't pay its guards. just like they didn't pay their debts to partners. Seo-ho then decided to enter directly, as it was clear this place was unprepared to receive guests. He stormed into the brothel, weapon in hand, a bright smile on his face, declaring they had come to collect the debt. Seo-ho entered cheerfully, whistling softly as he walked. This made a few people in the group feel it was strange, not understanding why his mood was so cheerful. Seo-ho charged straight into the room where Bok Bok was sitting, mockingly shouting that he had come to reclaim the money. A few people in the group still wondered why Seo-ho seemed overly concerned with collecting this debt. Bok Bok became enraged, shouting loudly, asking which bastard dared to barge in without notice. Just then, Seo-ho saw Seo So-chang lying in pain on the ground, his expression immediately changing. Seo-ho immediately called his close bodyguard, Yang Am, who instantly responded with seriousness and readiness. Seo-ho advanced towards Bok Bok, mockingly saying that at first he thought he was just a debt evader, but the truth was much worse. He continued to taunt Bok Bok, saying he didn't expect him to be so useless and pathetic, adding that if the previous owner saw this, he would surely be very proud, which infuriated Bok Bok. Bok Bok lunged towards Seo-ho, his entire body filled with killing intent. He swung his sword, intending a direct attack, but Seo-ho calmly parried the blow with ease. Meanwhile, a member of the Junhee Corporation whispered something to the person beside him. Seo-ho turned back to mock Bok Bok, saying that if he had already drawn his sword, he should just attack, not talk so much. Or did he want Seo-ho to beg before he dared to strike? Those words were like adding fuel to the fire, causing Bok Bok to scream, calling Seo-ho a brat, then launching another fiercer blow. But Seo-ho still calmly parried the blow with astonishing speed, stunning everyone present. Seo-ho stood still, smiling calmly, completely unfazed by Bok Bok's fury. Bok Bok still frantically attacked Seo-ho with all his strength, but Seo-ho easily neutralized each of his blows without any difficulty. Bok Bok's face gradually showed clear anger mixed with bewilderment, as he couldn't even touch Seo-ho once. He panted heavily, his body exhausted, wondering internally why Seo-ho could so easily parry all his techniques. Suddenly, he remembered a previous rumor, that the second son of the Junhee Trading Corporation, Jin Ho, was the martial arts expert, making him start to doubt who Seo-ho really was and how strong he truly was. Realizing his opponent was wavering, Seo-ho smiled mockingly, then coldly said that if he couldn't keep up, he would have to be punished accordingly. Bok Bok roared in anger, launching another unexpected attack, shouting that he wouldn't let Seo-ho escape so easily. But Seo-ho suddenly appeared behind him, his voice icy, telling him to grit his teeth. Then Seo-ho swung his staff, hitting him hard on the head, causing Bok Bok to collapse to the ground in excruciating pain. Seo-ho laughed at the thwack sound as the staff hit Bok Bok's head, mockingly wondering if his head was empty to make such a loud noise. Someone in the group worriedly whispered, asking if Bok Bok might die from such a strong blow. But Seo-ho calmly replied that he hadn't hit hard enough to kill him. A member of the Junhee group stepped forward, slapped Bok Bok hard across the face and ordered him to wake up immediately. Bok Bok regained consciousness, terrified to see the cold, grinning face of the Breezewing squad leader, Gyap Byung-chun, who had just bent down to ask if he was awake. The sight made Bok Bok scream in fear, recoiling as if electrocuted. Gyap Byung-chun laughed at his panic, his tone full of ridicule, saying he was already that scared just by seeing his face, then asked threateningly if he wanted to die. Bok Bok trembled, looking up to see Seo-ho standing before him, his eyes cold as if wanting to end everything right then. Seo-ho calmly looked at Bok Bok sitting on the ground, coldly stating this wasn't the first or second time his group had been late with payments, that the Not High Trading Guild had only been patient until now out of respect for the former owner, then asked if they thought the people of Not High were all fools. Bok Bok hastily denied it, stammering in panic, not understanding which payment they were referring to. Just then, Seo-ho threw a stack of papers straight at his face, saying those were all the records of shipments the Not High Trading Guild had provided to the Lianhua brothel. Seo-ho stated clearly that for the past year, they hadn't paid a single cent for those goods, then decisively declared that according to the signed contract, If payment wasn't made, full ownership of the Lian Hoa brothel would belong to the Not High Trading Guild. Hearing this, Bok Bok angrily shouted, accusing Seo Ho of presenting fake and fabricated documents. He continued to confidently declare that he knew the fire had destroyed all financial documents, so Seo Ho couldn't have evidence to accuse him, bluntly saying he was blackmailing. Just then, Giap Byung-chun frowned, his voice clearly losing patience, saying he couldn't tolerate those slanderous words any longer. Seo Ho immediately slammed his staff onto the ground, next to Bok Bok's head, then challenged him to look closely at the pile of papers he claimed were fake. Seo Ho picked up a sheet, holding it close to Bok Bok's face, coldly telling him to open his eyes wide and look at the ancient seal in the paper, faded with age. Sweat began to bead on Bok Bok's forehead, his heart pounding as he realized deep down that those documents were real, gradually making him panic. He began to wonder if the Dawn Corporation had made a mistake in devising this plan. Bok Bok trembled, his mind in turmoil, wondering if the Dawn Corporation had deceived him and why they would do such a thing. Seo Ho slowly waved the papers in front of him, mocking that this was the sound of his tiny brain trying to think. That remark made Bok Bok even angrier and more panicked. Seo Ho continued to taunt, asking why Bok Bok didn't manage the brothel properly and live a peaceful life instead of resorting to such despicable tricks. Then Seo Ho clearly concluded that Bok Bok had secretly conducted a series of shady transactions behind everyone's back. Just then, the chief manager of the Lian Hoa brothel, Seo So Chang, stepped forward, asking for permission to speak. Seo Ho immediately recognized the person standing before him, and remembered that this was the manager Bok Bok had treated poorly in the past. Seo Ho also remembered Seo So Chang as the one who had revived a nearly bankrupt brothel, turning it into one of the top 3 establishments in Hubei, thanks to his outstanding management skills, feeling sorry that he now had to work under someone like Bok Bok. Seo Ho stepped forward, bowing respectfully to introduce himself to Seo So Chang. But Seo So Chang, disregarding formalities, went straight to the point, presenting the Lian Hoa brothel's account book and asking Seo Ho to turn to page 7, revealing a newly opened branch that had not yet been officially registered. Upon hearing that, Bok Bok immediately jumped up, roaring angrily, threatening to kill Seo So Chang if he said another word. But he instantly froze when he felt the killing intent of Seo Ho's bodyguard standing behind him. The bodyguard was clenching a knife in her hand, her eyes sharp and cold, staring intently at him. Yet Bok Bok still frantically continued to threaten Seo So Chang more clearly and fiercely. A member of the group asked for permission to speak privately with Bok Bok. That person approached him, gently but firmly saying that everything was over, and told him to stop immediately. He sadly explained that Bok Bok had crossed the permissible limit long ago. Elsewhere, Seo So Chang recalled the rumors that had once spread about Bok Bok's past, that he was always compared to his deceased father, and it was clear his abilities were far inferior. Seo So Chang vividly remembered Bok Bok's image back then, lonely and dejected, collapsing under pressure and endless comparisons. Bok Bok was now gritting his teeth, his eyes blazing, muttering full of hatred, wondering if everyone really thought his father would sit in that position forever, or if he harbored a secret ambition to seize power. Seo So Chang understood better than anyone why Bok Bok had become such a twisted and resentful person. Afterwards, Seo So Chang explained to Bok Bok that although he always knew he could never replace his father's position, he still tried his best to support him, expressing regret for his efforts in maintaining a good relationship between the two. For his part, Bok Bok had shouted at Seo So Chang in anger and resentment, while Seo So Chang remained calm, asking Seo Ho to re-examine the previously mentioned financial ledgers. Just then, Seo Ho began to consider the possibility that the Dawn Corporation might be involved in the ongoing events. Seo Ho suddenly remembered that the Dawn Corporation was a subsidiary of the Bach Tien Trading Guild, and this organization had direct links to the Muram Alliance. Seo Ho wondered to himself what conspiracy the Muram Alliance was plotting this time, and as he was lost in thought, Seo So Chang spoke up, calling Young Master to bring him back to reality. His close bodyguard, Yang noticed his prolonged distraction and worriedly asked what was weighing so heavily on his mind. She asked him why he wanted to go to that area and requested he explain clearly so she could assist if anything happened. Xiaoho smiled gently, then said that he himself didn't fully understand the reason, only apologized and said he needed to find the answer himself. At this point, Seo So Chang was somewhat annoyed, silently thinking whether he should give Seo Ho a beating for his indifference, then said that area was the new wing Bok Bok was having built. When they arrived, Seo Ho noticed the new wing looked more ordinary than he expected, yet the surrounding atmosphere was strangely and inexplicably cold. Seo Ho asked bodyguard Yang Am if she sensed anyone around, and she replied that she didn't sense any presence. Seo Ho decided to temporarily step inside, thinking the place was empty. Upon entering, Seo So Chang immediately pointed out that the place was empty, because there was an order prohibiting anyone from entering until the next day. At that moment, Seo Ho began to sense something unusual about this place, and told Seo So Chang that he had also suspected this place before. Seo Ho immediately told Seo So Chang to stand right behind him, simultaneously preparing himself and his bodyguard for any dangerous situation that might arise. Very softly, Seo Ho called out to the person hiding in the shadows, telling them to reveal themselves immediately. A mysterious figure dressed in black, face covered, stepped out from hiding. Seo Ho was surprised by the person's ability to hide without anyone noticing, then loudly demanded they state their identity. However, the mysterious person did not answer. Instead, he drew his weapon and immediately prepared to attack. Seo Ho realized there was no other choice but to fight, then ordered Yang Am to protect Chief Manager Seo So Chang. The battle began as the mysterious person lunged to attack with terrifying speed. Seo Ho barely managed to dodge, shocked by the opponent's incredible speed. A fierce confrontation erupted as Seo Ho and the stranger continuously clashed with astonishing speed and skill. After a barrage of attacks, the mysterious person suddenly retreated. While retreating, he quickly dashed towards the door, intending to escape. But before disappearing, he threw a smoke bomb towards them. Seo Ho shouted loudly, ordering everyone to get down immediately. A violent explosion filled the space with smoke, dust, and debris. After the situation temporarily calmed down, Seo Ho immediately checked on Chief Manager Seo So Chang, who replied that he was fine despite being extremely panicked. Seo Ho then realized the bomb just thrown wasn't an incendiary bomb as he thought, but just a smoke bomb used to cover the retreat. He was now certain that the masked person's only goal was to leave the scene safely, and he silently confirmed that if that person had truly used their full strength, they would have been in extreme danger. Suddenly, he heard a voice from the corner of the room call out loudly, "Over here!" Turned out to be manager Seo So Chang, who was pointing to a secret underground entrance, saying he also didn't understand why Bok Bok had dug such a tunnel, but it led directly to the main building of the Lian Hoa brothel. Seo Ho was extremely surprised to discover such a secret tunnel. After a brief moment of thought, Seo Ho requested bodyguard Yang Am to guard the entrance to the secret tunnel. Seo Ho began to carefully examine the entrance, gradually realizing that the masked person was very likely directly connected to this tunnel. Seo Ho was utterly astonished when he discovered the symbol of the Dawn Corporation. That symbol was clearly engraved on the door leading to the tunnel. Afterwards, Seo Ho returned to the main building of the Nhat Hai Trading Guild in the Anquan Wing to meet his father, Unjil Sung. The father immediately asked about the existence of the secret tunnel connecting the building and the Lian Hoa brothel, as well as the Dawn Corporation symbol found there. The head of foreign affairs, Go In Pyong, then suggested that if the place was so troublesome, they should just sell the brothel. But Seo Ho immediately and vehemently opposed that idea. Everyone was surprised by his quick and decisive reaction, causing Go In Pyong to ask in surprise why he was so strongly against it. Seo Ho calmly explained that the Lian Hoa brothel was one of the 5 largest brothels in Hubei province, frequently hosting nobles and tycoons, offering great opportunities for networking and building relationships. He also asserted that through these relationships, they could gather invaluable information and effectively promote the Nhat Hai Trading Guild's products. Seo Ho continued confidently, explaining that if they kept the current chief manager, Seo So Chang, they wouldn't need much effort to manage it and could still reap long-term profits. His father, Unjil Sung, immediately agreed, stating that from what he had seen in the financial reports, manager Seo So Chang was indeed a rare talent. Meanwhile, the head of internal affairs, Yusaka, was smiling enigmatically, silently thinking that he was truly impressed by Seo Ho's abilities to the point of wanting to bring him into his management circle immediately. So Chang suddenly felt a strange cold chill run down his spine, making him shiver involuntarily. Yusaka turned to look at him with a cold smile, his gaze making him feel uneasy and terrified. Afterwards, the father told his son Seo Ho that he would give him a vacation as a reward for handling the recent incident so well. He explained that he understood his son was very tired after the incident in the finance division, so he wanted to give him a few days off to recover his spirits. However, the head of internal affairs, Yusaka, began to feel extremely angry upon hearing about Seo Ho's leave, his face clearly showing indignation and resentment. He repeatedly thought angrily in his mind, "No, this is unacceptable," as if trying to completely deny reality. Finally, Seo Ho calmly told his father that he would personally handle things with Yusaka, then gently told his father to leave without worry. Yusaka at that moment felt extremely scared by Seo Ho's terrifying gaze. He hastily pulled away from his grasp and tried to flee. A moment later, bodyguard Yang Am blurted out that the moment looked like a ghost had appeared in the east wing, making Seo Ho shiver slightly, though he couldn't help but laugh. As he left the place with bodyguard Yang Am, Seo Ho sarcastically wondered to himself why everyone kept mentioning ghosts. Then suddenly, memories from his past life flooded back. Seo Ho remembered why the Hubei nobles had supported the Muram Alliance and the Bach Tian Guild. It was due to secret meetings held in the underground tunnels of the Lian Hoa brothel. Seo Ho smiled confidently because that place was now under the control of the merchant group he led, meaning they had outmaneuvered the Muram faction. Yang Am looked at him worriedly, silently wondering if the young master had gone mad after seeing a ghost, especially since his face still held that strange smile. Seo Ho couldn't help but feel regretful, wishing he could have caught the masked person to find out more important information. Afterwards, Seo Ho turned to instruct bodyguard Yang Am to keep everything that happened in the East Wing a secret, explaining that he didn't want to cause his father any more worry. He began to think seriously about the masked man whose martial arts skills were on par with Bok Bok, and realized that if he had to confront the Muram Alliance in the future, many stronger enemies awaited. Seo Ho decided he needed to meet his master from his previous life again, and perhaps today was the most suitable time. At the same time, he thought of his master with deep remorse, remembering his words from years ago that if he had arrived just 2 hours earlier, he could have saved his son from death. In that moment, Seo Ho felt a surge of sadness, as if an old wound had been torn open again. Suddenly, Seo Ho asked Yang Am what day it was, surprising her as she didn't understand the reason. Upon hearing the answer, Seo Ho was stunned and extremely angry, because today was the day his master's eldest son would meet a tragic accident. Immediately, he rushed into the forest with Yang Am and a physician to try to reach the accident site. Seo Ho silently prayed he wouldn't be late, that this time he could change fate. He instructed Yang Am to take care of and protect the physician, while he himself would run ahead to the scene, so as not to miss the crucial moment. Yang Am nodded calmly, completely trusting her young master's decision. Seo Ho recalled that at this very minute in the past, the eldest son was playing with his younger brother in the bamboo forest, unaware of the impending tragedy. He ran quickly through the dense bamboo groves, a sense of anxiety and fear for the child's fate making his heart pound. As he ran, Seo Ho frantically searched for the two brothers in the bamboo forest, worried that something terrible was about to happen. At the same time, the older brother was very seriously injured, lying motionless on the ground, while the younger brother frantically tried to stop his bleeding. The younger boy cried, begging for help, his faint calls echoing through the forest. He shouted desperately, hoping someone would hear and come to help. Just then, Seo Ho arrived, hearing the cries for help which made him rush over without hesitation. The younger brother was still sobbing, his voice choked, begging his older brother for forgiveness, blaming himself because he was the one who invited his brother into the forest to play. Seo Ho approached, gently placing his hand on the boy's head, softly saying, "It's not your fault." He smiled warmly and said, "It was your cries for help that led me here to save you both." The boy burst into tears of relief, while Seo-ho gently said that he had done very well. Immediately after, Yang-am quickly appeared, bringing the physician to treat the injured older brother. Seo-ho stayed by his side, reassuring and holding the trembling younger brother in his arms. He continued to comfort the child, promising that everything would be all right and there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. Watching the physician treating his master's son, Seo-ho silently felt happy and relieved, because this time he had saved that precious life. The scene shifts to the Manhwa Trading Guild's medical wing. Seo-ho stood close to the hospital bed, carefully observing the eldest son's condition, silently thinking that if he had been just a few minutes late, the boy might not have survived. Seo-ho gently exhaled, telling himself silently, "I hope in this life I can see Master smile more, especially after his son has been saved." He also thought about the pain parents endure when they lose a child, a pain he himself couldn't imagine. Seo-ho clenched his fists, determined to change the future step by step, not letting tragedy repeat itself. He believed that now was the right time for his master to appear. Just then the master rushed into the room, frantically calling his son Huang Jin's name, full of worry. Seo-ho immediately realized that his master had just returned from a dangerous escort mission. He bowed his head, introducing himself politely. "Senior, I am from the Manhwa Trading Guild. I happened to find the young master in the bamboo forest and managed to provide timely medical treatment for him." The master bowed his head, thanking Seo-ho sincerely and gratefully. He stated clearly that without Seo-ho's timely intervention, the situation would have become a real disaster. But Seo-ho humbly replied that he was just lucky to be there at the right time. Afterwards, he honestly added that it was the younger brother who had truly saved his older brother's life by staunchly stopping the bleeding until he arrived. The master gently approached his eldest son, who was sleeping peacefully, and placed a hand on his forehead to check his condition. At that moment, the master was deeply moved by Seo-ho's humility and respectful demeanor. He softly said that he truly didn't know how he could ever repay such a great favor. Seo-ho was a bit flustered by the master's humble reaction, silently thinking that he never expected the master he knew from the past to be so sensitive and modest. Suddenly, the master's gaze fell on Seo-ho's hand. Something very strange attracted his complete attention. After a moment of contemplation, the master gently asked Seo-ho if they could speak privately. He also emphasized that they should move to a quieter place to talk. Seo-ho tensed slightly, a suspicion arising in his mind whether something serious was happening. The master remained silent for a moment, then firmly said that this was neither the time nor the place to explain everything clearly. He seriously told Seo-ho that what he wanted to say was related to the special nature of his body, leaving Seo-ho completely shocked and stunned. That evening, Seo-ho met his master again in a secluded forest, where the master apologized for meeting him so late at night and without any guards. Seo-ho smiled calmly, saying it was all right, then guessed that the master probably didn't want anyone else to hear what he was about to say. The master smiled confidently, praising Seo-ho as a very intelligent person. Seo-ho began to silently speculate if it was the internal energy he absorbed from the pure ice peach that had changed his body, and perhaps the master had discovered that change. Finally, the master seriously asked Seo-ho if he knew anything about the mysterious constitution called the Dragon Crystal Body. Seo-ho stood silently, shocked internally as he realized the master knew the truth about his special body. When the master confirmed that it seemed Seo-ho knew something about the Dragon Crystal Body, he smiled kindly and told him not to worry or be tense. The master explained that when he touched Seo-ho's hand earlier, he had sensed the extremely strong yin energy within him, and because he himself had studied ice techniques, a martial art based on yin energy, he easily recognized it. He confirmed with certainty that, from that moment, he had sensed Seo-ho possessed the special constitution, the Dragon Crystal Body. Seo-ho carefully asked if the master knew anything more about this special condition. The master calmly replied that he had met another person, who also possessed this strange constitution in the past. Xiao-ho was extremely surprised, blurting out, "Master, you really met someone with a constitution like mine?" The master confirmed it was true, but sincerely apologized that he couldn't reveal that person's identity. Xiao-ho nodded in acceptance, saying he completely understood and respected the master's reasons. Afterwards, the master revealed the real reason why he mentioned this. He seriously offered to teach Xiao-ho ice techniques, the martial art he had once cultivated. Xiao-ho pretended to be surprised, while internally thinking he had anticipated this, but still tried to act genuinely surprised. The master continued to explain that from their meeting, Xiao-ho saving his son's life, and Xiao-ho possessing the dragon crystal body, everything was destined. The master honestly said he wanted to repay this kindness, and earnestly begged Xiao-ho to let him teach him the martial art. Xiao-ho felt so joyful and relieved that it was hard to hide the radiant smile on his face. He then politely asked to learn the ice techniques, the martial art the master had proficiently cultivated. The master was a bit surprised by how quickly Xiao-ho accepted the offer, and didn't hesitate to say so. Xiao-ho explained how he could refuse the opportunity to learn from such a great master, the leader of the prosperous Escort Bureau, an organization that once had deep ties with his family's trading guild. The master nodded in agreement, then said they would start training the next morning. The next morning, the master began to explain the special technique Xiao-ho would learn, a supreme yin-cold martial art called the Extreme Yin Ice Heart Technique. He said that Xiao-ho already had internal energy in his dantian, and the only thing he needed to do was memorize how to circulate the qi as the master would instruct, then practice regularly. The master began to transfer internal energy into Xiao-ho, helping him clearly feel the flow of qi in his body. But at that very moment, he suddenly noticed something so strange it astonished him. He discovered that all of Xiao-ho's meridians had already been completely opened. The master looked straight into Xiao-ho's eyes and asked with a serious expression, "Have you ever learned any similar martial arts?" Xiao-ho immediately denied it, explaining that he had absolutely no reason to know, but internally he remembered that he had opened his meridians himself before. Afterwards, the master cautiously asked if Xiao-ho had ever been in mortal danger due to the excessively strong yin energy in his body. Xiao-ho honestly recounted that he had once consumed a miraculous spiritual medicine in the past, and had almost died because of its overly potent effects. The master nodded, understanding everything, then calmly said that this explained a lot, and he added that this martial art was originally created long ago to help people survive in harsh situations, especially when close to freezing to death. The master gently explained to Xiao-ho that the martial art technique he was about to learn was actually invented a very long time ago, during a time when their ancestors faced a terrible threat from extreme cold. Perhaps something similar had also happened to him in the past. This made Xiao-ho feel a bit guilty because he couldn't tell the master the whole truth. Just then, Xiao-ho felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. When he turned around, he saw his master looking at him with kind eyes and speaking in a warm voice. "Young master." Xiao-ho smiled faintly, nodding slightly in response to the concern. The master also smiled with satisfaction and said in a clearly joyful voice, "Very good. This is truly a good thing." A look of satisfaction was evident on the master's face as he told Xiao-ho that now that he was ready to use martial techniques, they could move on to combat training and physical strengthening exercises starting immediately. Xiao-ho's eyes widened in surprise, stammering in astonishment. "Master, you mean starting right now?" The master nodded seriously, confirming with a stern expression that this training would be extremely rigorous, enough to make Xiao-ho shiver, which made him feel a bit scared. Then the master continued gently, "Because you saved my son's life. So I will do everything I can to ensure that what I teach you will help you protect your own life." Xiao-ho began a period of extremely harsh training, both physically and mentally. The tiring administrative work at the office was combined with extremely strenuous physical exercises imposed by his master. For 3 days he buried himself in an endless pile of documents, and in his spare time, he had to practice relentlessly according to the strict instructions from his master, to the point where Xiao-ho was completely exhausted and silently resolved to do nothing but lie down and relax. The scene shifts to the finance wing, where an employee suddenly rushed into the room, panting, then loudly told the department head that a guest was waiting for him. The department head was very angry as he was busy. He snapped, "What guest?" But when the employee replied that it was Mr. Song, the department head's expression changed completely. He immediately said he would personally go to greet him. The department head then turned to Seo Ho and told him to prepare to go with him. Seo Ho asked in surprise and confusion, "Why do I have to go?" The department head explained that if Mr. Song had come, he would usually bring many more documents, and thus it was better for Seo Ho to go along, instead of wasting time explaining everything again later. Because that would just be a waste of time. Jun Seo Ho felt extremely annoyed by those words. He silently thought this department head was just pushing work onto him because he was too lazy. He told himself, "I really need to get out of this place as soon as possible." Afterwards, the department head left the office and instructed his assistant to take good care of Jun Seo Ho, according to his wishes. He even gave a meaningful smile and told the assistant that when he returned, he would give her more work. This made Do-yeon, the assistant, both surprised and somewhat inexplicably excited. Elsewhere, the department head had sat down with Mr. Song, who smiled and said, "It's been a long time since I last saw you." Mr. Song was about to say something, actually, but suddenly hesitated mid-sentence, faltering. The department head was surprised by this hesitation and asked Mr. Song what he was trying to say. But Mr. Song evaded, pointing to the person with him and saying it was just his assistant. He almost called him a servant, but corrected himself in time. Afterwards, Mr. Song honestly stated that he had come today to ask for help with something. The department head seriously asked back, "What is the problem?" Mr. Song explained that, a few days ago, some officials had informed him that a portion of his land had not been declared during tax assessment. As he continued, Mr. Song said he had discussed this with a trustworthy person. That person said the officials seemed to be trying to find something. The department head calmly replied, suggesting it might just be a misunderstanding. He said if they found what they were looking for, he could directly meet the officials and clarify things. But then Mr. Song suddenly revealed something strange. What they were looking for was a doll that could move and dance at certain times. Jun Seo Ho heard this and was extremely astonished, repeating in his mind in bewilderment, "A dancing doll." The scene shifts to another member of the trading guild, Jun Hee, who also repeated with a stunned expression, "A dancing doll." The department head joined the conversation, nodding and saying he understood Mr. Song's position. But then he cautiously asked, "Is it true that official Bo Jong-sa personally requested this item?" Mr. Song hesitated slightly. Then, with a tense expression, he reluctantly admitted that the truth was a bit different. "Actually, this involves Madame Do." An awkward silence enveloped the room after Madame Do's name was mentioned. Tension was evident on everyone's faces. The department head then bowed his head in apology to Mr. Song and explained that, unfortunately, they couldn't accept to help this time. At that very moment, Jun Seo Ho suddenly remembered what he had heard about Madame Do. In his mind, he imagined himself tied up and gagged as a warning about the danger of the matter. Jun Seo Ho began to explain that recently, a strange game had appeared among noblewomen. In it, each month they would choose one woman and assign her the task of finding rare items as a challenge. Once they requested a golden flower, and if anyone failed the task, they would be forced to host a lavish banquet for all participants. Conversely, the winner would be treated like a queen by the other noblewomen until the new round began. The creator and operator of this game was Madame Do. She was the wife of official Bo Jong-sa. Over time, this game, originally just for entertainment, gradually transformed and developed into something highly competitive and stressful. The fierce rivalry among the nobles eventually crossed the line, seriously affecting the lives of ordinary people. Jun Seo Ho had silently admitted to himself that he couldn't understand why they indulged in such frivolous games. But now, after witnessing Mr. Song's extreme distress, who insisted he was wrongly accused, he gradually understood some of the truth behind it. Mr. Song had confessed with an emotional expression that he had never done anything shameful in his life, let alone evade land taxes as accused. He added that if he could obtain that rare doll, he would directly go to official Bo Jongsa to clear up this whole misunderstanding. Jun Seo-ho wondered to himself how many people had been entangled and had their lives ruined in such a way. He suddenly remembered that Mr. Song was a long-time acquaintance of the Yunhai Trading Guild and was always trusted and respected by the people. Right then, Jun Seo-ho thought that if they helped Mr. Song this time, he would surely repay the favor many times over in the future. But then he hesitated, considering that getting involved with Madame Do at this time was extremely dangerous. The scene ended in a heavy silence. Mr. Song sat dejectedly, while the head of the division just silently placed a hand on his shoulder to comfort him. With a faint, sarcastic smile, Jun Seo-ho silently wondered what he was planning. Then he suddenly recalled the tragic end of his trading guild in the past, wondering why it had come to that, and what he would do in this return to change that fate. He still couldn't forget the image of his father tied up, his body emaciated, and swore to forever engrave that cruel image in his heart. The head of the division unexpectedly untied Jun Seo-ho, surprising those around him who thought he was just a servant. At that very moment, Jun Seo-ho seriously said there was something important everyone needed to know, concerning a rare item being fiercely sought after. He smiled confidently and declared he would personally go to retrieve that precious item. Jun Seo-ho explained that the real name of the item Mr. Song mentioned was the self-dancing doll. When thinking of this doll, the memory of the person who created it in his previous life clearly emerged. That person came from a mysterious place called Kim Tien Village, located in Jiangxi Province. Jun Seo-ho decided that if he could get there and ask about that craftsman, he might find a clue. But he also reminded himself to absolutely avoid confronting Madame Do. He also remembered that the emperor was about to issue an edict completely banning the noblewomen's game. And once this edict took effect, all the troubles caused by Madame Do would end forever. Jun Seo-ho reassured himself that as long as he didn't let Madame Do find out, everything would be fine. Just then, his trusted bodyguard, Yang Am, called out loudly, causing Jun Seo-ho to turn around in surprise and ask what she wanted so urgently. In a stern voice, Yang Am reminded Jun Seo-ho that next time he needed to inform them of the time and place of his departure beforehand, especially when the trip to Jiangxi Province was so sudden. Jun Seo-ho tried to justify that the road was dangerously covered in snow, so he didn't want everyone to worry. He added that he was now capable enough to handle business trips on his own, especially since this mission was crucial for the Yunhai Trading Guild. He also reassured her that his father and everyone else had agreed to let him go. He smiled faintly and said his brothers had given him gifts and wished him luck on this trip. Finally, Yang Am relented but still sulked that he should leave the sword behind as it could be dangerous. Then she saw the bright smile on Jun Seo-ho's face and wondered why he was so happy. Just then, Ban Gap excitedly interjected, saying he was both nervous and thrilled because this was Jun Seo-ho's first business trip. One of the accompanying martial artists, Lim Ji-hong, smiled and told Yang Am not to worry about Jun Seo-ho. Jun Seo-ho himself also spoke up, confirming he would do his best to ensure the trip went smoothly. Another martial artist joked that boss Yu Hak had instructed them to bring Jun Seo-ho back as soon as possible. Yang Am chuckled sarcastically, saying that advice actually made sense, though she still felt a bit disgruntled. Martial artist Lim Ji-hong further explained that this time, both the KVK-Pak Escort Guild leader and the leader of the Silver Wind Squad, Jung Chung, were accompanying them, so there was no need to worry if anything happened. That martial artist even joked that unless they encountered bandits, there was nothing to fear. Just then, Jun Seo-ho inexplicably felt worried, wondering if he was dragging everyone into danger. He immediately jumped out of the carriage, alarmed, asking if something had happened. Jun Seo-ho saw something and whispered in amazement, not understanding what was happening before his eyes. A large man suddenly appeared, his sharp eyes looking straight at them. The strange man flashed a wide, calm smile and said it had been a long time. Afterwards, the leader of the Silver Wind Squad, Jung Chung, stepped forward to greet the KVK-Pak Escort Guild leader, Myung Hyun, with a calm smile, asking about his well-being. The large man turned his head towards the carriage and said that their direction seemed to be towards Jiangxi Province. Yung Chung nodded in confirmation and said they were transporting goods that needed to be kept dry. But due to heavy snowfall, their travel speed had slowed down, and everyone was tired. Hearing that, the large man nodded, saying it was good news for them. He explained that the fortress commander had sent him to invite the group to stop and rest at the city, to have some hot tea to warm up. Yung Chung and KVK Pak Myung-hyun glanced at each other, their eyes showing agreement with the offer. Meanwhile, Jun Seo-ho stood slightly apart, his heart suddenly heavy as he realized those people were members of the notorious Green Forest bandit gang. He quickly understood that the appearance of these people in the area definitely meant that some very special figure was nearby. The scene shifts inside the fortress, where everyone is gathered around a large dining table, while the fortress commander laughs heartily to welcome them and express his joy for their visit. The fortress commander introduced himself as Jang Dae-soo, known by the title Wolf Fang Sword Demon, then smiled and greeted each person warmly. At that moment, Yung Chung stepped forward and introduced himself as holding the third position in the Yunhai Trading Corporation, and also the captain of the Silver Wind Squad. Next, KVK Pak Myung-hyun also stood up, introducing himself as the head of the prosperous escort agency. Jang Dae-soo gently explained that he had proactively invited them here because he was worried about their situation amidst the severe cold, and also thanked them for not hesitating to accept despite the sudden invitation. Yung Chung smiled calmly, thanked him, and said that anyway, the group was in great need of a place to rest. At the same time, Jun Seo-ho silently thought that the bandit leader Jang Dae-soo seemed to be a genuinely kind and sincere person, truly deserving to be the leader of the forest bandits. Jang Dae-soo then raised his teacup with a cheerful expression and invited everyone to enjoy the hot tea and food before it got cold. In another corner, one of the companions felt restless, quietly asking Jun Seo-ho's bodyguard if they were really in the middle of a bandit's den and why everyone was so calm. The bodyguard replied calmly that not all bandits or pirates sought trouble with merchant caravans and escort agencies. Jun Seo-ho now smiled faintly and further explained that in the past, those who initiated conflicts without a plan were soon eliminated. He continued objectively that merchant caravans could usually travel safely if they adhered to routes tacitly agreed upon with the bandits. Someone in the group looked at Jun Seo-ho with a slightly surprised and confused expression. Then he directly asked Jun Seo-ho why he spoke with such certainty, as if he had experienced this before, when this was his first time traveling, making Jun Seo-ho somewhat flustered. Jun Seo-ho tried to regain his composure, smiled, and said it was just valuable advice his older brothers had passed down to him, then told everyone to eat quickly before the food got cold. He sipped his tea and silently praised its excellent flavor. Meanwhile, he wondered if this tea was expensive, and if it was reasonable for them to use such precious tea at such a harsh time. Suddenly, Jang Dae-soo turned to Jun Seo-ho and spoke, saying he didn't look like someone who traveled frequently. Jun Seo-ho was slightly embarrassed, smiled, and apologized for forgetting to introduce himself. He apologized once more, saying he had indeed forgotten to introduce himself earlier. Jun Seo-ho then looked up, confidently introducing himself as working in the finance department of the Yunhai Trading Corporation. Jung Dae-soo seemed slightly surprised to hear the name Jun, then immediately asked Jun Seo-ho directly about his relationship with the head of the Yunhai Corporation. Jun Seo-ho calmly replied that person was his father. Jang Dae-soo burst out laughing, saying he had a feeling from the start that Jun Seo-ho was special, then invited him to sit down and eat with him quickly. Jun Seo-ho sat down, silently observing his surroundings thoughtfully. His gaze rested somewhere as if analyzing the current situation. He looked at the food before him and noticed that the host was extremely hospitable and kind. But he couldn't help feeling uneasy, because there was something very strange that he couldn't yet explain. He looked at the food again and suddenly thought that, compared to the meals in his own merchant caravan, this place was truly very frugal. Jun Seo-ho silently wondered if the bandit leader was the type to neglect his subordinates to curry favor with distinguished guests. For such a large fortress to seem financially strained was truly very unusual. He ate small bites cautiously, the thought still lingering in his mind that this situation didn't make any sense. Why were they treating guests so lavishly when they themselves didn't have enough to eat? Finally, he concluded that perhaps they were deliberately trying to make a good impression, only to demand a higher passage fee without revealing their intentions. Jun Seo-ho continued to think carefully, believing they didn't want to reveal their weakness in front of merchants, and that they might not yet know about the important secret hidden in this mountain range. Afterwards, he decided to take advantage of this opportunity to turn the situation to his favor, then spoke frankly to Jang Dae-soo. He bluntly said that it seemed he had been facing quite a few difficulties lately. Everyone in the room, including the fortress commander, was astonished by Jun Seo-ho's unexpected remark. Jang Dae-soo slowly approached Jun Seo-ho, then whispered to him in a low warning tone, calling him young master. Then he continued, this time clearly a threat, that although he would temporarily assume Jun Seo-ho's words were due to ignorance, what he had just said was truly a serious insult. Jun Seo-ho maintained a calm expression, smiled, and apologized if he had offended anyone. But he added calmly that there was no need to react so harshly. Afterwards, he stated his thoughts directly that he was treating the caravan generously, despite difficult circumstances. And the ultimate purpose was probably just to request a higher mountain passage fee than usual. Everyone in the room was stunned, wondering how Jun Seo-ho could have figured that out so accurately. Jun Seo-ho continued, saying everyone in this room was just pretending to eat well in front of the guests. Then he turned and directly asked Fortress Commander Jang Dae-soo if anything he said was wrong. Jang Dae-soo was so angry he slammed his hand on the table, making everything shake. He immediately jumped up from his seat, clearly extremely angry. His eyes blazed, staring at Jun Seo-ho furiously, as Fortress Commander Jang Dae-soo leapt up in extreme anger, his face clearly tensed, making the atmosphere in the room suffocating and oppressive. The bodyguard standing nearby frowned worriedly, wondering internally if Jun Seo-ho had gone mad, and if so, what should they do next? At that very moment, Jang Dae-soo suddenly burst into loud laughter, a peal of laughter that echoed throughout the room. The laughter was so unexpected that everyone couldn't help but be stunned, not understanding what was happening. After a moment of confusion, a few of them began to laugh timidly after seeing their leader laugh so strangely. Meanwhile, Jun Seo-ho and the Silver Wind Squad leader Jung Chung remained silent, their faces tense, their eyes unable to hide their suspicion and confusion. After laughing his fill, Jang Dae-soo turned to Jun Seo-ho and apologized, admitting his previous act was truly terrible. He casually admitted that everything Jun Seo-ho had just said was true, not wrong in the slightest. Then he began to explain the reason why the fortress had fallen into its current state. This winter, the snowfall was much heavier than in previous years, and indeed this year was a difficult one for them. Jang Dae-soo continued, saying he understood Jun Seo-ho didn't mean to offend, but on the contrary seemed to be offering a solution to salvage the situation. This made Jun Seo-ho both surprised and somewhat relieved. Jun Seo-ho silently thought that Jang Dae-soo was truly a generous person for a bandit leader, and in his previous life, he never believed he was someone who could live his whole life just as a bandit. Jang Dae-soo smiled confidently, silently waiting to see what Jun Seo-ho would say next. Jun Seo-ho began to present his plan, assuring that it was very simple but extremely effective. Everyone in the room was surprised and gradually listened attentively to Jun Seo-ho, their eyes fixed on him. But before getting straight to the point, Jun Seo-ho asked the fortress commander if the sword on the table was his, then remarked that he seemed to cherish it greatly and always kept it in perfect condition. Jang Dae-soo burst out laughing, replying that for any warrior the sword was like a part of their body, so of course he had to take good care of it. Then he curiously asked what the sword had to do with the solution Jun Seo-ho was about to propose. Jun Seo-ho smiled and asked directly, "Is Wudong Mountain more important to you than that sword?" Jang Dae-soo was stunned by the strange question, then replied loudly, "Wudong Mountain is everything to me. How can you doubt that?" Jun Seo-ho then asked him directly, "If the mountain is so important, why do you let it be neglected?" This angered his subordinates, who shouted, demanding Jun Seo-ho stop his provocations immediately. Jang Dae-soo tensed and asked back, "What are you implying?" Jun Seo-ho calmly replied, I'm talking about the snow. Jun Seo-ho explained that due to the heavy snowfall, the number of people crossing the mountain had significantly decreased, severely reducing revenue from passage fees. He added that their group, though large, had also found it very difficult to get here, so how could smaller groups possibly make it through? Then Jun Seo-ho enthusiastically continued that if they made an effort to clear the snow and open the path, people would find it easier to pass through, no longer needing to take detours, and as a result, revenue would increase, benefiting everyone. Jiang Dae-soo was truly astonished, admitting he had never thought of such a simple solution. The people in the fortress began to buzz with conversation, some even joking that they would never have thought of this. An educated person is indeed different, which made another person angrily retort that they were criticizing Jun Seo-ho tactlessly. Some even ridiculed their leader for not thinking of such an obvious solution. Jiang Dae-soo listened to these words with a confused and uncomfortable expression, while a few tried to smooth things over, afraid he would be hurt. Afterwards, Jiang Dae-soo stepped in front of Jun Seo-ho, called him Young Master Yun, then frankly said he was truly ashamed for not being able to think of such a simple solution himself. He seriously declared that he owed Jun Seo-ho a favor, and then directly asked if he wanted any reward. He emphasized once again that he was very grateful, then sincerely asked again, "What reward do you want? Just say it." Hearing that, Jun Seo-ho chuckled silently to himself, thinking, "Finally, this moment has arrived just as I hoped." Jun Seo-ho requested to speak privately with the fortress commander for a moment, surprising everyone listening, who began to whisper. At that moment, Jun Seo-ho's face showed a mysterious smile. He said in an enigmatic tone that he held something extremely valuable for both the Yunhai Corporation and the Wudong Mountain Fortress. Afterwards, Jiang Dae-soo led Jun Seo-ho to a high point overlooking the entire fortress, and as they looked down together, Jun Seo-ho exclaimed in amazement at the breathtaking scenery, while Jiang Dae-soo proudly replied that this place was their pride. He added that he chose to build the fortress here precisely because he loved the scenery, especially in winter, when snow covered everything, creating a dreamlike landscape. After a few seconds of silence, Jiang Dae-soo seriously asked Jun Seo-ho what the real reason for requesting a private conversation was, as he felt it was very important. Jun Seo-ho looked at him with a calm smile and asked directly about his knowledge of spiritual herbs. Jiang Dae-soo admitted he didn't know much about such things and asked in surprise why Jun Seo-ho had suddenly brought it up. Just then, Jun Seo-ho suddenly recalled an event that had happened 5 years before he died in his previous life. At that time, rumors spread everywhere that rare spiritual herbs had begun to appear on Wudong Mountain, attracting the attention of many factions. After the rumors spread, the Muram alliance led by Bach Tin-hung attacked the Wudong fortress swiftly and brutally, seizing all the spiritual herbs there. But at the present moment, when Jun Seo-ho had just been revived, the Muram alliance still knew nothing about the existence of those herbs. Jun Seo-ho seriously turned to Jiang Dae-soo and said that indeed, many precious spiritual herbs of extremely high value were growing on Wudong Mountain. Jiang Dae-soo was extremely astonished, especially when Jun Seo-ho pointed down at his right foot and said that right below it was a blue flower. When he bent down to look, he truly saw a small blue flower growing amidst the white snow, his expression unable to hide his utter shock. Jun Seo-ho explained that it was a snow spirit flower, a spiritual medicine very good for those with internal organ damage. Jun Seo-ho added that besides that flower, there was also the white tiger spirit flower, which helps expel poisonous qi, or species like snow ginseng that help the body absorb medicine more effectively. Jun Seo-ho asserted confidently that on this mountain, there were countless other precious spiritual herbs growing naturally, just waiting to be discovered and harvested by someone worthy. Jiang Dae-soo was extremely astonished and asked Jun Seo-ho where he had obtained such valuable information. Jun Seo-ho smiled and replied that, as a merchant dealing in all sorts of goods, having some basic knowledge about herbs and how to identify fertile land was only natural. Jiang Dae-soo chuckled lightly, saying that even for a merchant, discovering spiritual medicine so quickly was extremely rare. Jun Seoho replied calmly that the specific details were a trade secret, then smiled mysteriously, adding that he was not an ordinary merchant, though he wouldn't dare claim to know the future. Jung Dae-soo stared intently at Jun Seoho's face, then seriously asked what he ultimately wanted from him. Jun Seoho replied that he wanted to sign an exclusive deal for trading spiritual herbs with the Yunhai Trading Guild, and also proposed to keep this matter absolutely secret. Jang Dae-soo hesitated for a moment, then asked why this agreement needed to be kept so secret. Jun Seoho calmly explained that if news about the spiritual herbs leaked out, both sides would be in trouble. Other trading guilds would come to compete, and protecting the territory from robbers targeting the spiritual herbs would also become difficult. Jang Dae-soo angrily said that these spiritual herbs were not ordinary treasures, and outside interference would cause many troubles, especially from those who wore the mask of righteousness, but actually committed crimes everywhere. He was clearly referring to the Muram alliance. Jun Seoho was shocked internally, thinking in amazement, could it be that he already knows about the Muram alliance? Jun Seoho continued the conversation with Jang Dae-soo, offering an attractive proposal that he would purchase spiritual herbs at a good price, and also provide materials to help distinguish spiritual herbs from common medicinal herbs. Jun Seoho gently extended his hand towards Jang Dae-soo, asking if he would accept this offer. Jang Dae-soo shook Jun Seoho's hand, officially confirming he would cooperate in business with the Yunhai Trading Guild. Afterwards, Jun Seoho sincerely thanked Jang Dae-soo and suggested they return to finalize the contract. Jun Seoho smiled and added that the contract was the foundation for a good transaction. The scene shifts to another time when Jun Seoho returns to the fortress. As he entered, he heard a commotion outside and wondered in surprise what was happening. Suddenly, one of them burst in shouting, telling Jun Seoho to stop. Then Mr. Shen pulled him and cried out, "Young master!" Everyone around looked extremely worried, saying they had feared something bad had happened to Jun Seoho because he was gone for too long. Jun Seoho calmly reassured them that he was completely fine and nothing had happened. Even so, someone in the group said that letting him leave without a bodyguard truly worried them, even though it was his own request. Jun Seoho smiled kindly, reassuring them once more that he was all right. If I truly felt it was dangerous, I wouldn't have requested a private meeting from the start. Just then, Jang Dae-soo appeared with his subordinates, laughing loudly and saying everyone was worrying too much. Jang Dae-soo added, "Jun Seoho is much stronger than you think. Among everyone here, he has the highest actual strength." Everyone was stunned by Jang Dae-soo's words. They began to whisper and gossip, so he asked them to listen clearly to what he was about to say. Jang Dae-soo clearly declared that from this day forward, Jun Seoho of the Yunhai Trading Guild would be treated as an honored guest at this fortress. He also instructed his subordinates to treat Seoho and his companions with the utmost hospitality. Jang Dae-soo added that he didn't want to be rude by collecting a passage fee from someone who had saved him. Therefore, he proposed that Seoho be allowed to pass freely without paying any fees. But Seoho politely declined the offer, saying he couldn't leave without paying anything. He then requested bodyguard Yang Am to give a bag of silver to Jang Dae-soo. Seoho smiled and said that if he felt awkward accepting it, then consider it the first deposit for today's agreement. Jang Dae-soo smiled in agreement and said he would gladly accept the silver. After giving the bag of silver, Seoho decided it was time to leave. He said they were in a hurry and needed to set off immediately. Meanwhile, Jang Dae-soo thought to himself, admiring Seoho's wisdom and courage despite his young age. He silently thought that Seoho reminded him of an old friend. Painful memories suddenly resurfaced, the image of Jang Dae-soo standing amidst a sea of fire appearing clearly. Someone shouted angrily at him, telling him to come to his senses, asking if he really wanted to die a meaningless death there. He clearly remembered that person's advice, telling him not to think about revenge anymore, to disappear, to forget the martial arts he had learned, and to start using completely different weapons than before. That person also instructed that he must hide all his martial arts skills, meaning even his weapons had to change, and an important piece of advice echoed in his mind: live. A painful memory returned, a severely injured subordinate telling him, "No matter what happens, you must live." The scene shifts to Jiang Dai-su, commander of the Huangjong Mountain Fortress, standing in deep thought, telling himself that after meeting a courageous young man like Seiho, he couldn't help but recall the past. Jiang Dai-su stood before the city gate, watching Seiho and his companions set off for trade, the sound of wheels rolling steadily fading into the distance. He continued to tell himself, remembering the advice of a loved one from years ago, never dream of revenge. However, in the depths of his pain and humiliation, he wondered, how could he continue to live when he had abandoned both his family and the most important person? Even so, Jiang Dai-su still smiled sadly, admitting that despite being advised many times, he couldn't stop himself from wondering, with such courage and talent, where would that young man, who reminded him of someone from the past, go in the future? Jun Si-ho suddenly realized he was standing in a strange, dark place, with thick fog surrounding him from all sides. Suddenly, Seiho's eyes flew open in terror, frantically wondering where he was. As he was moving, Seiho suddenly saw something lying on the ground. He frowned, wondering to himself, why is there a doll lying here? Just then, a faint moan echoed from somewhere, making him even more alert and anxious. He immediately turned around, thinking there must be someone else here. Seiho cautiously approached and saw a small child lying gasping on the ground, weakly calling, "Mother, Grandma." Seiho felt a surge of compassion and pity in his heart. He gently approached the child, softly asking, "Are you okay?" But the child suddenly, without warning, gripped Seiho's clothes with surprisingly strong force. Then it slowly raised its face, a terrifying and frightening visage, with pleading eyes. The child spoke in a chilling voice, "Save me." At that very moment, Seiho woke up, screaming in panic from the terrifying nightmare. Assistant Bangap rushed in hastily, his face alarmed, crying and calling, "Young master, are you okay?" Extreme worry was evident on Bangap's face as he asked again, "Seiho, are you really all right?" Bodyguard Yang Am also entered, asking calmly but unable to hide her concern, "Did you just have a nightmare?" Seiho replied with a forced, tired smile, "It's nothing, just a strange dream." But deep down, Seiho kept telling himself he had to find that child as soon as possible, or something bad would happen. Yang Am gently advised, "You're pushing yourself too hard trying to find that doll maker." Seiho just smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps that's true." He calmly added, "But if we handle this well, the reward will be great." And then he seriously ordered, "Today we must continue searching." With a confident expression, Seiho added, "We will not stop. We must find that doll maker." Soon after, Seiho and his companions continued their search in Kim Teen village. This was already the third day since they arrived. As they walked around the village, Seiho expressed relief at being able to move freely, thanks to the efforts of his master and Captain Young Chung. However, after 3 long days, Seiho couldn't help but feel frustrated for not yet finding the craftsman he was pursuing. He was sure the artisan was living in the village, in a house surrounded by boxwood trees. But the search was much harder than he had imagined, because almost the entire village was covered in boxwood trees. Everywhere he went, he only saw identical trees, making all clues meaningless. Seiho stood silently, his face full of dissatisfaction, while Bon Gap casually ate and seemed amused, and Yang Am stood beside him, still trying to guess what Seiho was thinking. Finally, Seiho realized he had no choice but to continue searching, wandering around the village for a while longer. As he was walking, he suddenly felt eyes watching him from afar, causing him to stop, fully alert. Seiho cautiously realized that rival merchant groups had started following him since they discovered the presence of the Younghae group in Kim Tien village. Those people had been tailing them for several days. Some merchants worried that the Younghae Trading Guild would affect their trade routes, so they secretly followed Seiho and his companions. Just then, a member of the group quietly said to Seiho, "They're following us again." Seiho felt extremely annoyed. This added more trouble while he was already too busy searching for the doll maker. He decided to deal with the followers first. Seiho turned to Ban Gap with an interested look. "This market has many interesting things, doesn't it?" Ban Gap immediately replied cheerfully. That's right. The food is delicious and the goods are strange. Even after looking for a few days, I still find it interesting. At the same time, Yang Am noticed something unusual nearby and suggested they quickly change direction towards it. But she was surprised to see Ban Gap and Siho had already dashed off ahead, forcing her to chase after them, shouting, "Wait, let's go together." After running around the market for a while, they finally managed to shake off their pursuers and sat down to rest, panting heavily. Yang Am sighed in relief, saying with a reassured tone, "Finally, we lost them." Ban Gap asked in surprise, "I was being followed, you all knew beforehand?" Seho just calmly replied, "It was too obvious." Suddenly, a loud shout rang out, "Thief!" attracting the attention of the whole group. They turned their heads to see a man chasing a thief. He shouted, "That bastard stole my wallet! If I don't get it back, my whole family will starve." Seho immediately observed the situation carefully. He turned to Ban Gap and asked, "Let me borrow the apple you're holding." Just then, Seho used his special energy technique, the extreme yin ice heart technique, concentrating his internal energy into the apple. He clearly remembered his master's teachings. When you master this skill, you will be able to channel yin energy into objects. Despite trying to concentrate, Seho realized the amount of energy he could channel was still quite small. But even so, he thought that was enough. He threw the energized apple towards the thief. The thief was completely unaware, and as he ran, he stepped on the apple, causing him to slip and fall hard to the ground. After falling to the ground, the thief angrily muttered to himself, wondering who had left something on the road that made him trip. Just then, Seho and his companions approached and sternly demanded he return the money pouch. The terrified thief immediately knelt down, begging for his life, and quickly handed over the money pouch. Seho took the money pouch and returned it to the robbed man. The man was so moved he bowed his head, thanking him profusely. Seho smiled kindly, then said he himself would take this thief to the authorities. The man was extremely grateful, sincerely inviting Seho to his home for a cup of tea to show his gratitude. Seho politely declined, saying what he did was insignificant and didn't deserve to be called a benefactor. But the man earnestly pleaded, his eyes tearful, saying that if he couldn't properly express his gratitude, he would feel guilty for the rest of his life. Finally, Seho smiled and agreed to go to his home for tea. Upon arriving at the humble home of his host, Jun Seho and his companions were modestly told by the homeowner that the place was simple and nothing special. But Seho sincerely praised the house, saying that though rustic, it was very warm and beautiful. As they approached, two small children rushed out from the courtyard, cheerfully calling out, "Father!" The father opened his arms wide, lovingly embracing his children, asking if they had fun playing today. Then he turned to his guests, smiling, introduced his children, and politely asked them to greet the guests. The two children greeted Seho in unison, making him look at them intently for a moment, as if recalling something. Seho was surprised to notice boxwood trees planted in the garden, which somewhat astonished him. Seho looked closely at the older boy, a strange feeling rising within him, as if this boy was the doll maker he was looking for, though he couldn't be certain. Inside the house, Seho sat in the living room with his guard, seriously considering the possibility that the boy was indeed the craftsman. The guard then suggested he could directly ask if the boy knew how to make dolls. Seho felt the child's face closely resembled the person he had seen in his dream. This made him even more convinced that the boy was truly special. Just then, the father entered carrying a tea tray, apologetically saying sorry for keeping the guests waiting. Then he humbly said he had nothing precious to offer such a distinguished guest as Seho. But Seho gently replied there was no need to apologize, and he even praised the fragrant tea, which made the host extremely happy and touched. The man suddenly remembered he hadn't introduced himself. He then said his name was Gong Dui, living in Kim Tien village, a potter by trade, and once again expressed his deep gratitude to Seho. Seho was slightly embarrassed, replying that he only did what anyone should do. Then he politely asked for the names of Gong Dui's children. The father smiled and replied that his older son was named Gong Min, and his younger daughter was Gong Rui. At that point, Seiho also decided to introduce himself fully. He said he was Jun Seiho from Songyang County, Hubei Province, and thanked them again for their warm hospitality. Gongduai humbly said that Seiho must be a person of high status, yet treated commoners like him with kindness. That made him very grateful. Zuho replied that he himself was just an ordinary merchant, nothing compared to Gongdui, a father raising two very well-behaved children. Seiho added in a sincere tone that although he had never been a father, he had heard that raising children was as difficult as governing a country. Gongduai confided that sometimes he felt guilty towards his children for not being able to give them more. Even so, Seiho gently said, "I hope my words are not too abrupt, but I can see the joy and happiness in your two children, which proves Gongduai has put in his utmost effort as a father." Just then, Seiho unexpectedly discovered a small toy moving on its own. He was very surprised and immediately asked the two children who had made that toy. The little girl cheerfully replied that her older brother had made it, and added that her brother could make many other things too. Seiho was extremely astonished when he realized it was a self-propelled toy car. He observed it intently, his eyes full of admiration. Seiho remembered that in his previous life, this type of toy was only common among wealthy children. He began to wonder, how could such a young child create such a complex item? Seiho couldn't hide his admiration for young Min's talent. He asked Min, "Besides this toy, have you ever made other things yourself?" The younger sister quickly answered, affirming that her older brother had made many items. Suddenly, Seiho noticed something unusual. He turned his head and saw someone hurriedly passing by. The little girl turned back and handed Seiho a wooden doll, excitedly inviting him to take a look. As he observed the doll, Seiho realized it was quite similar to what he had imagined. Though it looked much simpler than the exquisite dolls he had seen, the quality was very good for a beginner's level. Everyone gathered around the table, the little girl curiously asking why this doll wasn't moving. Then she guessed it might be because the material it was made from wasn't durable enough. Min explained that this doll moved thanks to the elasticity of a material taken from fish bladders inside. When the key was wound, it would move. Min added that this doll was made from common materials from the market, so it broke easily and couldn't be used for long. Seiho asked Min if he could remake this doll if he had better materials. Min smiled gently and nodded in confirmation. At this point, the father, Gongdui, also joined the conversation. He spoke up, confirming that his son was indeed very skilled at making such small, pretty items. However, he couldn't hide his regret, saying that talent brought in no money and that his son only knew how to make those things to play with the neighborhood children and his little sister at home. Seiho heard this and was astonished, repeating the father's words as if he couldn't believe it. "Doesn't earn money?" Then he turned to look straight at Gongdue, asserting firmly, "Your son's talent is a precious gift from heaven." Seiho analyzed clearly, saying that if properly utilized and invested, that skill could absolutely bring them a large profit. Gongdue heard this and looked confused, asking in surprise what kind of wealth he was talking about. Seiho patiently explained, the dolls and handicrafts Min made had a rare uniqueness. If further improved and displayed beautifully, they would surely sell for a very high price on the market. But Gongdue just sighed, apologized, and sadly said that in the end, it was the merchants who made money while those who made the products, like them, received very little. He gave a simple example. A craftsman like me has no power or status, often just being exploited. As the saying goes, the bear dances, but the merchant collects the money. Just then, Seiho sensed Gongdue's pessimism, and also understood that if things continued this way, this family could very well fall into lifelong servitude. Seiho decisively told himself that if he truly wanted to change their tragic fate, he had to act immediately, without further delay. He called out Gongdue's name to get his attention. Then he directly asked how much profit percentage he currently received from selling his ceramic products. Gongdue replied slowly, "I'm not sure, but probably less than 10%. Seiho seriously proposed, "If Min agrees to join the Yunghei Trading Corporation's workshop, I will sign a contract and give him 40% of the profits." Gungdu-I was stunned upon hearing the 40% figure. He asked Si-ho in amazement, "Are you really going to give my son such a large amount?" He hesitated, then said honestly that he needed more time to think, as he still couldn't fully understand the meaning of this offer. Si-ho smiled calmly and nodded. "I completely understand. This is a serious matter. Naturally, you must think carefully. No need to rush a decision." After speaking, Si-ho stood up gently, thanked the father for his hospitality and the warm tea, then said he would wait for his decision without putting any pressure. Before leaving, Si-ho turned back and added, "I will return to Hubei in 2 or 3 days. During that time, I will be staying at an inn called Iain." He instructed that if Gongdu-I made a decision, he should just come find him there. Gongdu-I just silently nodded, while the 2 children waved goodbye to Si-ho enthusiastically, as he prepared to leave. Afterwards, Si-ho and his companions continued on their journey to the next destination. On the way, female bodyguard Yang Am spoke to him with a doubtful expression. "Are you sure young Master Min is the craftsman we're looking for?" But Si-ho didn't answer, just remained silent, his face still full of worry. Internally, Si-ho thought deeply, admitting that although he really wanted to help them, he still didn't have enough clear reasons or basis to intervene. He felt angry and disappointed that up to this point, nothing had really happened to justify his intervention. The scene then shifts to the Heijeo Oki merchant group, where 2 men are talking about one of them failing to collect the monthly payment from Mr. Gongdu-I. That person bowed his head, apologizing profusely, saying things didn't go as planned. He explained that the person he sent had been caught by the soldiers of the 3rd young master of the Younghei family. But he quickly reassured that he had another plan, so there would be no problem. The other person then asked sharply, "Do you know why the son of the Younghei Corporation appeared in this area?" He replied with a worried expression that he had people tailing Si-ho for several days, but he just wandered around the village and the market, doing nothing special. He guessed Si-ho was just gaining practical experience, even though he visited Gongdu-I's house the day before. He added that it seemed Gongdu-I only offered tea out of gratitude, completely coincidental, not worth worrying about. However, he lowered his voice and revealed, "Soon, we will force Gongdu-I to sign a slave contract." Hearing this, the other man angrily slammed the table, saying Gongdu-I was intending to betray them by switching to work for another merchant group after all they had done for him. He angrily asserted that foolish commoners like that couldn't be trusted, then ordered that if Gongdu-I continued to resist, he should be brought to him. He ended with a sinister smile, promising to teach Gongdu-I a painful lesson so he would know his place. The scene shifts to Gongdu-I's house at night, where he is sitting pensively with his wife, sighing heavily. His wife asked why he was sighing like that, and Gongdu-I replied that he couldn't stop thinking about the man he had met 3 days ago. His wife asked back, "You mean the man who helped protect our money pouch?" Gongdu-I nodded in confirmation, then said that person seemed very interested in their son's talent, and even made a cooperation offer with a profit share of up to 40%. But his wife expressed deep suspicion, saying that the more she thought about someone making such a generous offer, the more uneasy she felt because she had been deceived too many times in life. Gongdu-I was astonished by his wife's skepticism, asking back if she really believed the words of that swindler. His wife hesitantly said that despite her doubts, it was the Heijeo Oki group that had helped them get by, and reminded him of the good things they had done. But as the conversation continued, Gongdu-I began to get angry. He reminded his wife that they had both agreed to find new work as soon as the contract with Heijeo Oki ended. Just then, Gongdu-I unexpectedly picked up something from the floor. His eyes suddenly filled with utter shock. It turned out to be a gold coin. He turned to his wife, surprised, asking where she had gotten this gold coin. She smiled calmly and explained that she had met Huang Garyong from the Heijeo Oki merchant group earlier, and he had given her this gold coin, saying they could pay it back after the children grew up, so the family would be fine for a while. Afterwards, she added that the other person, referring to Si-ho, seemed very suspicious to her, because he suddenly appeared and offered to share 40% of the profits. That was truly unbelievable for ordinary people like them. She further emphasized her suspicion that if this wasn't a scam, what else could it be? With a determined voice, she declared she would never allow her son Min to follow someone like that. Although Gong Dui was still confused and worried, he continued to stare intently at the gold coin, clearly very hesitant. Suddenly, Gong Dui heard someone calling from outside, asking if he was home. This made him both surprised and worried as it was already late. When he opened the door, a group of people were standing in front of the house, and the leader of the group gave a suspicious smile, saying it seemed Gong Dui was still awake. Gong Dui worriedly asked the man why he had come at this hour, and why he had brought bodyguards. The man replied with a mocking tone that he didn't expect Gong Dui to be the type of person to dare take assets belonging to the Hejeo Ok merchant group. Gong Dui was stunned, outraged by the false accusation. He immediately protested, repeating that it was impossible. However, the other person ignored him, continuing to accuse Gong Dui of planning to flee at night after taking the gold coin. His wife trembled with fear, trying to speak in a trembling voice that she never intended to run away. He himself had given her that gold coin, but he ignored her words, angrily pointing at the gold coin and loudly declaring it was the property of the Hejeo Ok merchant group, and that they were now thieves, caught red-handed with clear evidence. Just then Min woke up due to the noise, frantically calling for his mother. The mother tried to defend herself, her voice fearful, explaining she didn't understand what was happening, and reiterating that he himself had given the gold coin for her family's living expenses. But he once again ignored her words, mockingly asking if she had any papers or contract to prove it, which deepened the fear in her heart because she didn't even know what a contract was. Afterwards, he angrily decided to end all arguments and ordered his men to immediately take them away. When Gong Dui and his wife tried to resist, asking why they were being treated like this, they were immediately dragged away brutally. The children, Min and Ruai, awakened by the screams, rushed to their parents, frantically calling for them in fear. But the man blocked Min, saying with a cold smile that it was just a simple contract, not worth running after, and demanded the children stay inside the house. Min tried to resist but was forcefully pushed away. Min fell to the ground in pain, while his sister screamed his name in terror. A few objects shattered as Min fell, adding to the extreme fear of the two children. He began to curse the children angrily, calling them animals for their stupidity and stubbornness. But suddenly he was startled when a large knife plunged into the ground right in front of him. A strange man with long gray hair appeared, slowly approaching. Then he spoke in a chilling voice to Min, saying the situation was now very bad, and handed the boy a knife. He told Min that in this world, no one gets what they want without bloodshed, and if he was a real man, he should face him if he was ready to die. Min was terrified at that moment, while the other man drew his sword, preparing for a confrontation. Min and his sister Ruai quickly fled, screaming in fear as they ran, while the strange man didn't pursue them but just stood watching. Huang Gaoyong's subordinate looked surprised, asking Bayon, the strange man, if he really let the children go so easily. Bayon coldly replied that he never said he would harm children. Then, in a tense voice, the subordinate asked Bayon again if he, Bayon, had to do these dirty jobs himself. Bayon laughed mockingly and replied that if he wanted that, he would have to pay more, then turned away. Bayon left the place looking bored and annoyed as he walked, muttering sarcastically that life in this dull countryside was meaningless, and he was only doing this because he was paid. As he walked alone, Bayon vented his anger by using terrifying strength to smash rocks with blows so fast no one could see clearly. He sneered, wondering if there was anyone strong enough in this region to even slightly interest him. The scene shifts to another place at the Ian Inn, where Seho is surprised when someone reports that young Gong Min has come looking for him. Zuho was extremely shocked by this news, worriedly asking where Gong Min was currently, especially since it was late at night and the child had appeared alone without his parents. Just then, Gong Min and his younger sister Ruai appeared before Seoho. Both were tired and exhausted. Seoho immediately noticed Gong Min was injured and quickly asked what had happened. He approached Gong Min, gently observing him, then discovered the boy's body was full of injuries. He gently asked again what had happened. Tears began to fall down Gong Min's cheeks as he tried to tell Seoho what had happened to his family. Then the child began to recount everything in a trembling voice, while Seo Ho and those beside him listened silently, their faces full of anger and anxiety. Seo Ho realized that part of the blame lay with him. He blamed himself, thinking he should have arranged for their protection and should never have left them alone like that. Meanwhile, one of Seo Ho's subordinates was bringing delicious food to Ruai. The little girl ate while he watched her intently. Seo Ho and his subordinate sat around a table discussing Rui's condition, remarking that she was very resilient despite what she had been through. Just then, Ruai reappeared with a female bodyguard, looking much healthier. The bodyguard informed Seo Ho that Ruai only had minor injuries and was currently healthy, and Gong Min was also recovering well. Afterwards, the female bodyguard said that Gong Min wanted to speak privately with Seo Ho. Gong Min stepped out, still looking timid. He asked Seo Ho in a trembling voice if what he had once said, that his talent could earn a lot of money, was true. Gong Min choked up, tears streaming down his face as he spoke emotionally. "If that's true, please save my mother. I'm willing to do anything, work tirelessly to repay you no matter how much." Seo Ho silently looked at Gong Min for a few moments, his eyes as if pondering something profound. Then he gently placed his hand on the boy's head, smiled kindly and said, "Sorry, but that request cannot be fulfilled." Gong Min was blank, disappointment evident on his face as he asked in a trembling voice, "What do you mean?" But Seo Ho quickly explained clearly, "I never intended to make you work for free. I will sign an official contract with you and give you the profit share as promised." He continued, "But to do that, I need your parents' consent, so they need to be brought here first." Seo Ho turned to Gong Min, saying with confidence, "Stay here and take care of your younger sister Ruai, and I will go get your parents." Seo Ho stood up, bowing his head to thank the head of the guard unit for taking care of the children in his absence. Before Captain Young Chung of the Silver Wind Squad, Seo Ho displayed his righteous character. "After learning the truth about Gong Dui's family situation, I cannot ignore their suffering. This is my duty as a member of the Not High Trading Guild." Young Chung sighed, explaining he couldn't send many guards with him because they had an important meeting with the Enhai Chao Trading Guild, which was the main objective of this mission. Seo Ho smiled calmly. "It's all right. The meeting with those merchants is just a peace negotiation, not a fight." Young Chung nodded in agreement. "Then I will send 3 members of the Silver Wind Squad with you. Be careful on the road." Seo Ho thanked him sincerely. As he stepped out of the gate, preparing to leave, Seo Ho met the head guard KVKP Akama Huyen waiting for him up ahead. KVKP Akama Huyen handed Seo Ho a sword. "I hope you won't need to use it, but it's best to carry it." Seo Ho hesitated slightly, as he had never learned swordsmanship, but still nodded in thanks and carefully strapped the sword to his side. As Seo Ho was leaving, KVKP Akama Huyen used a sound transmission technique to whisper a warning about a dangerous individual named Bang from the Dark Brown Trading Guild. He emphasized, "Be extremely careful. Never underestimate your enemies in the martial world." Afterwards, KVKP Akama Huyen sternly warned, "When you return, training will resume and will be even harsher than before." This made Seo Ho uneasy. Seo Ho left with 3 members of the Silver Wind Squad, ordering everyone to set off quickly. The scene shifts to the headquarters of the Dark Brown Trading Guild, where Gong Dui and his wife are being held before the group's leader and officials. The leader accused Gong Dui's wife of stealing a gold coin worth only 100 silver. He coldly declared, "According to our laws, whoever steals must compensate 5 times the value. Clearly, you don't even have that amount." Gong Dui tried to defend his wife. "We didn't steal anything," but he was cut off by the leader who ordered him to stop resisting. "Sign the slave contract immediately." Gong Dui angrily shouted, "You people have no humanity, worse than animals." An official indignantly slapped Gong Dui hard across the face. He shouted, "Shut up! Show some respect to your future master!" Gong Dui fell to the ground in pain, while his wife frantically screamed his name in desperation. The leader interjected, smirking, "We should resolve this calmly, no need for violence." But immediately after, he threatened, "If you dare report to the authorities, Your entire family will be sold into slavery to the harshest place. It's better to work for me." Gongdu, I tried to utter in desperation. It's all because I intended to switch to another trading group at the end of next month. But the leader pretended not to understand, turning his face away as if he heard nothing. He coldly added, "If you resist further, you will be handed over to the authorities, and life will be so miserable that many have chosen death to end it." He spoke venomously. Then he smirked cruelly. "With your stubbornness, who knows, maybe your children will live longer than others." This completely broke Gongdui, who trembled and begged for forgiveness. But he just shrugged, sneering, "Sorry, I didn't quite hear that." Another official shouted, "Bow your head and apologize properly." Gongdui collapsed, crying and banging his head on the ground. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please spare me." Blood covered his face as Gongdui choked out in pain. "I'll sign. Just please spare my children, don't drag them into this." The leader then ordered Gongdui released, and the subordinates immediately let him go. He smiled sinisterly, holding the contract out to Gongdui. "Wouldn't it have been less painful if you'd done this from the start?" Another one jeered. "Look at those who only learn their lesson after being beaten and humiliated." Suddenly a loud noise erupted. The door was kicked open forcefully, startling everyone into turning around. Xiaoho appeared in the doorway, his eyes mocking. "That's right, some people only come to their senses after being hit really hard." Xiaoho walked in calmly, sword in hand. "I only intended to come here to talk peacefully." He smiled. "But the door is already broken. A few more hits probably won't matter," Xiaoho said with an air of confidence and sarcasm. "So who wants to be hit first?" Official turned pale upon seeing Xiaoho stammering and trembling. "Who are you?" The leader snapped angrily. "You lot, who is this person?" And a subordinate stammered in reply. "That's Yun Xiaoho, the youngest son of the Not High Trading Guild." The leader of the dark brown guild sneered contemptuously. "So it's the brat who's been lurking around Kim Tian village these past few days." Then mocked, "I also know you've been following me." Xiaoho gave a disdainful mocking smile, saying he didn't need anyone to follow and protect him, because he already knew too much about that merchant group leader. The leader turned purple with rage, roaring what Xiaoho knew to dare speak like that. But Xiaoho remained calm, his voice full of mockery, replying that he knew very well. Just a dirty fellow who specialized in deceiving honest people and forcing them to sign slave contracts. Xiaoho continued bluntly, his voice as cold as ice, that the man was nothing but a greedy beast who had lost all humanity, a tiny coward who trembled every time he heard the name Not High. He continued to mock, saying that it was merchants like him who caused the entire merchant class to be despised. His sinister face and shaggy beard looked just like the typical swindler in a primer. Hearing that, the leader began to tremble with anger and humiliation, stammering incomprehensible words in his fury. Xiaoho didn't stop, continuing to joke sarcastically that if such an ugly bearded fellow dared to confess his love to someone, he would surely be immediately thrashed with a bamboo stick. Unable to restrain himself any longer, the leader screamed madly, ordering his subordinates to immediately capture and deal with Xiaoho. The masked bodyguards immediately rushed forward with terrifying speed, drawing their swords to attack Xiaoho. But Yang Am, Xiaoho's loyal bodyguard, quickly dashed out to block them. Her reaction was as precise as if she had anticipated every move. She struck with lightning speed, taking down each one with blows as fast as lightning. Amidst the fight, she smiled calmly, saying it had been a long time since she had fought like this. After easily defeating all the soldiers, Yang Am stood calmly in the middle of the battlefield. She ended the fight in a flash, her body untouched by dust, her eyes still full of confidence. She stood silently amidst the scattered bodies, leaving those around her too terrified to speak. One of them whispered worriedly that they hadn't expected Yang Am to be so strong, especially when Xiaoho had previously said he only came to talk. Xiaoho smirked slightly, muttering that now that the riffraff had been cleared out, he could finally begin the real conversation. Just then, the leader panicked, shouting loudly for his men to stop Xiaoho, running and yelling that he didn't know martial arts. Panting and terrified, the leader muttered angrily where Bang was. Hadn't he hired him for this very situation? Just then, Bang appeared from behind a curtain. He calmly walked in with a sarcastic smile, asking if it seemed everyone was looking for him. The leader of the dark brown guild shouted angrily, asking where he had been all this time, and if he thought he would get paid for doing nothing. But Bang just sneered, saying he wasn't even sure that leader had enough money to pay him the promised fee. He proposed changing the deal. If paid 10 times the amount, he would deal with Seo Ho immediately. The leader reluctantly agreed, calling Bang a damned blackmailer. Hearing that, Bang tightened his grip on his weapon, declared the match begun, mocking that now he truly deserved that 10-fold fee. The men of the dark brown guild began to shout, warning each other about Bang's impending attack. But he charged in with terrifying speed, easily felling many with just a few moves. Bang's face bore a chilling smile, one red eye glowing, revealing extreme cruelty and a terrifying killing intent. Just then, Seo Ho rushed out to parry the blow, his eyes showing both anger and surprise at Bang's audacity. Bang laughed mockingly, asking if Seo Ho wanted to, he could also try to bribe him with money. Meanwhile, a brief dialogue took place between the leader of the dark brown guild and a close official, confirming that Bang, though appearing ordinary, was actually a first-rate expert. The official explained that a first-class expert was capable enough to lead a small sect, while those at the peak were far beyond that level. The leader sneered contemptuously, ordering Bang to teach that arrogant young master a lesson about the laws of the martial world. A great battle erupted. Seo Ho and Bang exchanged blows continuously with extreme speed and power. Seo Ho calmly said he didn't need to bribe someone like Bang, because he was confident he could handle him. Those words angered Bang, who growled a threat that a pampered young master like Seo Ho should know to hold his tongue. He immediately launched an extremely powerful attack, rushing towards Seo Ho with storm-like speed. The two continued to fight at breakneck speed, making it impossible for anyone to follow the action. While fighting, Bang still maintained a mocking smile, admitting he was starting to be impressed with Seo Ho's skills, though he had previously thought him weak. After several exchanges, the two separated, both preparing for the next phase of the fight. Bang confessed that initially he thought Seo Ho was just a weak kid, but now he had to admit he had some guts. He pulled something from his robe, mocking that the martial world was not an easy place to survive. With that, he threw a small vial towards Seo Ho, as if to prove his words. Seo Ho swung his sword, shattering the vial in mid-air, but a strange liquid splashed onto his face and eyes. A sharp pain spread to his eyes, making Seo Ho suspect the liquid was a vision-corroding poison. In a disoriented state, Seo Ho remained calm, telling himself he had to find a solution immediately. Seo Ho recalled his master's teachings about the yin-yang ice heart technique, that when a high level of cultivation was reached, the practitioner would feel discomfort whenever exposed to evil Kree or killing intent. Seo Ho immediately understood that discomfort could become an absolute advantage in combat without needing his eyes. He told himself that in his previous life, he had never reached that realm, and now he understood the true importance of the training process. Seo Ho remembered his master once saying that upon reaching a high level, one could sense all enemy movements without seeing, and that sensation, if honed long enough, would become a weapon more fearsome than any blade. At that moment, Seo Ho realized that, even if only slightly, he had reached a level where he could sense Bang's movements, even while his eyes were still obscured by the splashed liquid. Seo Ho gathered his internal energy, regulated his breathing, began to concentrate intensely, his mind replaying the arduous training sessions he had practiced daily for a long time, maintaining absolute focus. And just as Bang's attack was about to land, Seo Ho unexpectedly dodged perfectly, leaving his enemy no time to react. Immediately, Seo Ho counterattacked with a powerful blow that struck Bang squarely, catching him completely off guard and sending him reeling back. Bang quickly retreated, his face unable to hide his astonishment at Seo Ho's speed and reflexes. He exclaimed in disbelief, asking Seo Ho how he knew he was about to attack from behind. Seo Ho smiled mockingly, replying jokingly that if he wanted to know the answer, he had to pay, because knowledge is never free. This provocation enraged Bang to the extreme. He gritted his teeth, threatening a brutal revenge. Meanwhile, the members of the Dark Brown Guild were writhing in pain from their injuries. One of them cried out for help from the martial artists amidst the chaos and extreme panic. Seoho's bodyguard, Yang Am, clearly showed her worry and anger, because there were too few people capable enough to provide first aid to the injured. She turned her head to the other side of the room, where the atmosphere was filled with panic, and met the terrified gaze of Gong Dui and his wife. At the same time, one of the Dark Brown members tried to lead their leader outside to protect him from danger, but the leader looked very hesitant and tense as his eyes met hers. Yang Am immediately shouted loudly, ordering everyone to quickly treat the injured and stop the bleeding. Hearing that decisive command, the leader and his assistant did not hesitate, immediately acting on her words, rushing to assist resolutely. Just then, Bang regained his strength, roared angrily, and launched a more powerful attack aimed straight at Seoho. Seoho used his sword to parry the blow with extremely skillful technique, easily deflecting the attack and sending Bang sprawling to the ground. Bang lay panting, exhausted to the point of collapse, while Seoho still stood calmly before him, declaring it was time to end this battle. A wicked smile appeared on Bang's face. He said it had been a long time since he had a fight that excited him so much. Unexpectedly, Bang threw his sword aside. He casually declared that he didn't use his sword because he didn't want to tarnish the reputation of his martial school with this dirty work. He looked at Seoho, saying that from this moment on he would acknowledge his strength and fight seriously. Seoho laughed, saying now he understood why Bang's swordsmanship was so weak. His real strength lay in his fists and feet. Seoho threw his sword to Yang Am. Yang Am, confused, asked what on earth was happening. Seoho stood firm, clearly stating his name. I am Un Seoho of the Not High Trading Guild. And since his opponent had abandoned his sword, he too would fight with the fist techniques he had painstakingly practiced. In Seoho's mind, memories of his past life surfaced, where martial arts were merely a tool for survival. And now, he bowed his head, calling Bang Senior, showing genuine respect for him. Bang frowned, his voice cold, saying he didn't respect Seoho's courage and promised to teach him a painful lesson. But in his heart, Seoho had already decided that, in this life, martial arts would not just be a means of survival, but would become a core part of helping him achieve a greater goal. With a determined gaze and fierce will, Seoho launched a ferocious attack on Bang, silently vowing that in this life, he would become stronger than anyone. The confrontation between Seoho and Bang was extremely tense. Seoho continuously parried attacks with skilled combat techniques and absolute concentration. Bang executed a powerful technique called Song Sai Dong Huang, twin firewood same direction, hoping to break Seoho's solid defense. But what astonished him was that Seoho parried the blow with ease, almost without difficulty. Bang's heart was filled with doubt, not understanding how someone as young as Seoho could possess such strong practical combat ability. The battle raged fiercely, both continuously throwing punches and kicks at high speed, creating resounding impact sounds throughout the room. Bang kept telling himself he was stronger than Seoho, but Seoho's continuous parrying of his techniques made him even more confused. He began to sink into chaotic thoughts. In Bang's mind, the question echoed, what secret helped Seoho defend so effectively that he didn't take a single hit? After a moment of thought, Bang concluded it wasn't due to eyesight or special techniques. So, what truly created that ability? Just then, Seoho landed a powerful punch straight to Bang's face, making him angry and bitter, exclaiming he never thought he'd get hit like that. Suddenly, memories of Bang's childhood flooded back, when he was a weak child, cowering in a squalid corner, afraid he might die there. At that time, a mysterious man approached, looked into his eyes, and said his eyes were too sad. A child shouldn't have such eyes. The man asked if he truly wanted to live or accept dying in that desolate place, then gently extended his hand, asking if he wanted to follow him. The man's warm and sincere smile made Bang feel at ease, as if for the first time in his life, someone cared about him. The scene shifts to another memory, where Bang is strangling another man who trembles, begging him for mercy, asking why he's doing this. Bang coldly replied he was just following the client's request. This man was willing to pay double just to save his life. But Bang just smirked, asking how much money he could pay, his voice devoid of emotion. Before the exchange ended, an old man entered, shouting at Bang, reminding him he had forbidden him from using martial arts on the weak. The old man shouted in desperation that if he continued like this, he should never come back. But Bang calmly replied he had only come to say goodbye. The old man tried to argue but coughed violently and collapsed. Bang looked at him, coldly saying he was born from the streets, and violence was all he knew, then asked back if living by violence was a sin. The old man, in pain, said Bang's martial arts were meaningless because they lacked soul, driven only by greed and selfishness. And one day, he would understand that. The scene shifts to a large outdoor courtyard where Bang is surrounded by a group of people, mocking him. They jeered that he never understood how cruel the world was because he was always the one hitting others, never the one being hit. One of them continued to mock that even weak merchants who knew nothing about martial arts, if united, could take him down. That guy said with a mocking tone, "Don't be sad when you go to hell, because what's happening to you now is just the retribution you deserve for the cruel things you've done." Suddenly the scene changed. Bang stood tall amidst the bodies of the very same people who had just mocked him. He had acted ruthlessly, without mercy. All of them were brutally defeated by him. As he sat amidst the cold corpses, Bang's eyes suddenly stopped when he saw a strange knife fall to the ground. The object attracted his attention inexplicably. Just then, a mysterious man appeared, extending his hand towards him, saying with admiration that Bang had eliminated those who had long been his obstacles, then asked if he wanted to cooperate. Bang smiled, asking back what price he would pay for that cooperation. In his heart, he silently thought, the only thing he truly craved was simply to live. He once wished for a life full of power and wealth, but after the brutal beating he endured, he realized that aspiration was shallow and meaningless. Amidst the fierce battle, a terrifying and blazing energy erupted around Bang. He roared in his mind, rejecting death in this brutal place with fierce will and desperate resistance. He began to execute an extremely dangerous and powerful technique called Kon Ran Nut Chung Thiet Ung, Snake Knot Iron Eagle, hoping to end the battle as quickly as possible. He launched the move with tremendous force and speed, charging straight at Seo-ho, trying to turn the tide. Seo-ho was stunned by that power, beginning to feel he was truly in a dangerous situation. As the blow was about to connect, energy from Seo-ho suddenly erupted powerfully, making Bang clearly sense an impending threat from the counterattack. However, Bang still smiled sinisterly, thinking his attack had broken Seo-ho's defense. He roared loudly, unleashing his full power in a finishing blow. Die! But once again, Seo-ho stunned him with a lightning-fast counter, causing Bang to lunge forward in vain, completely missing his target. It was then that Bang remembered his master's words from long ago. Your fighting style has no soul, based only on greed and selfishness. One day you will understand this. Seo-ho began to gather his combat energy, preparing to launch a counterattack, taking advantage of the momentary chaos in his opponent's mind. Bang was stunned as his master's teachings from years ago echoed in his mind once more, and now, he finally admitted his master was right. Seo-ho launched a direct, powerful blow, causing Bang to fully awaken, realizing his own mistakes and foolishness. In that moment, Bang felt as if he were standing before his master's grave, silently lamenting that his punches, what he called strength, were ultimately meaningless. He collapsed after the fatal blow, his body hitting the ground hard. In intense pain, Bang tried to get up, coughing blood, his whole body trembling from numerous wounds. On the other side, Seo-ho stood panting, having also just finished a difficult battle. Seo-ho looked towards Bang, who had failed and was kneeling, gently thanking him for the lesson this battle had brought. The scene shifts to another time, Gong Du-ai expressing his deep gratitude to the Knot High Trading Guild for helping him, confessing he didn't know how he could ever repay them. But Seo-ho just replied calmly that he helped for his own benefit as well. This surprised Gong Du-ai, who then asked what he meant. News of the Black Umbrella Guild's collapse quickly spread everywhere. Its leader was handcuffed, initially loudly denying all accusations. But when Seo Ho presented the fake gold coin this person had used to threaten Gong Dui, the leader was stunned, unable to make any excuses. Internally, Seo Ho thought he recognized the fake coin because in his previous life, that leader had been executed precisely because of this item. Finally, everything was thoroughly resolved. The leader of the Black Umbrella Guild was arrested, still shouting angrily before the crowd. However, amidst the chaos, Bang silently disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Seo Ho turned to Gong Dui, smiling friendly, saying he helped him because it also benefited himself, as ultimately he was just an ordinary merchant. Gong Dui emotionally said he was willing to do anything to repay the kindness Seo Ho had shown him. Seo Ho smiled faintly, saying he liked that answer, then unexpectedly said, "Then give me your son." But immediately after, he explained he just wanted to sign an official employment contract. Seo Ho turned to the child named Gong Min, calling his name with a friendly and warm smile. He approached Gong's family with evident joy, waving brightly, then asked Min if he still remembered the promise between them. Min looked at Seo Ho with surprise and happiness. Seo Ho smiled, his eyes sincere, affirming that the promise was still intact. The next scene transports viewers to a luxurious setting. A beautiful woman is sitting with her attendants, discussing Gong Dui's recent joining of the Not High Trading Guild. Upon hearing the news, the mysterious woman smiled faintly, her eyes clearly showing interest. She said, "Things are starting to get interesting.